So the story kicks off at a total sham of a trial. Our hero Kiska gets slapped with a guilty verdict and is sentenced to get tossed straight into the absolute worst place imaginable, the Katarov dungeon. Our boy is screaming his lungs out, swearing he's innocent and that he didn't do a damn thing. But the priest judge straight up ignores his pleas and orders the guards to drag him away. Kiska is just left cursing and shouting that he's been totally framed. Now let's rewind a bit to see how our protagonist ended up in this massive mess. Kiska lives in Katarov village, which happens to sit right next to a super dangerous S-rank dungeon. The place is always crawling with high-level adventurers trying to clear it, but Kiska, he's just a regular old farmer. Before all this drama, Kiska was sitting by his field looking depressed as hell because his crops were completely trashed. To make things worse, Darga, the village head's spoiled son, shows up with his goons just to mock our boy for having a garbage harvest. Turns out, Darga and his crew were the exact jerks who ruined the field in the first place. Kiska has zero power here, so he has to swallow his pride and apologize. See, Kiska is an alco, which means he has silver hair. People with silver hair are treated like absolute trash because some ancient alc allegedly betrayed humanity and teamed up with demons back in the day. But Darga isn't trying to hear any apologies. He gets pissed, punches Kiska right in the face, and his buddies jump in for a group beating. Our boy Kiska can't even fight back. His luck is emptier than a wallet after a steam sale. He just has to curl up and take the hits. Later that day, Kiska is limping through the streets, looking like a walking bruise. A girl stops him and asks if Darga bullied him again. It's Namia, his childhood bestie and literally the only person in the entire village who gives a crap about him. She tells him to sit tight so she can clean up his wounds. Honestly, she's the only one who doesn't treat Kiska like a mutant outcast. When Kiska thanks her and complains about how everyone hates him just because his silver hair makes him look disgusting, Namia actually tries to cheer him up, telling him his hair looks cool. Kiska is pretty shocked because his hair has always been a total curse. When Namia drops a massive bomb, she's getting forced to marry Darga. Kiska's heart completely drops, but being the nice guy he is, he still tries to congratulate her. Namia looks at him and asks if he's actually okay with this, which totally throws him off. She then asks if he plans on staying in this dump of a village forever. When Kiska says yes because he has nowhere else to go, Namia warns him that this place will eventually break him. Kiska is lost, asking what else he's supposed to do, and that's when Namia grabs his hand and proposes they run away together. She's got some secret savings and thinks they can start fresh somewhere far away. Kiska is stunned but asks if she's legit, and Namia admits she absolutely hates Darga. Hearing this, Kiska finally gathers the courage to confess his feelings, and surprise, surprise, she feels the exact same way. But cut to later that night, Kiska packs light, grabs a few things, and leaves his house feeling like his dark days are finally over. But the moment he gets to Namia's house, he hears her screaming from inside. Panicking, our protagonist bursts through the door, only to find Darga and his thugs putting their hands on her. Darga barks at Kiska, asking what the hell he's doing there. Kiska, seeing Namia crying, gets a sudden burst of bravery and tells Darga to get lost. When Darga just stands there smirking, Kiska actually throws a punch and hits him right in the jaw. Damn, a big mistake. That just makes Darga furious. Darga retaliates with a brutal punch to Kiska's gut and a knee straight to the face, dropping our boy instantly. The three thugs start stomping Kiska into the dirt while Namia screams for them to stop. Darga pauses, reminding Kiska that Namia is his fiancée now. Then, while his friends pin Kiska down, Darga starts literally ripping out Kiska's fingernails to torture the truth out of him. Namia breaks down, crying that she'll confess everything if Darga just stops. Kiska, even while getting his face smashed in, begs her to keep quiet, but Darga punches him again. As Kiska starts losing consciousness, he hears Namia spill the entire escape plan. Right before he blacks out, he sees Namia smiling sadly at him, right before Darga grabs her by the throat. The next day is an absolute nightmare. Kiska wakes up to find out he's being framed for breaking into Namia's house, attacking her and murdering her. The truth is Darga killed her in a blind rage after finding out about the plan, but Darga's powerful dad covered it up and pinned it all on our boy. Now Kiska is sentenced to the Katarov dungeon execution. When the executioner asks if he has any last words, Kiska just stays silent. There's no point, nobody believes a silver-haired guy anyway. They tie him up and Darga stands nearby sneering, mocking Kiska because nobody ever survives the dungeon teleportation. Kiska is shoved onto the glowing magic circle, his heart burning with pure hatred for Darga and the village. Kiska lands hard inside the S-rank Katarov dungeon. Instantly, he hears a terrifying roar and spots a rank bugbear monster nearby. Our boy starts shaking like a leaf on a treadmill. He knows the rumors that if you meet a bugbear, you're dead meat. The monster charges and Kiska tries to run, but he trips and falls like a klutz, crying out for anyone to save him. Suddenly, time freezes, and a glowing figure appears out of nowhere, asking Kiska if he wants help. Kiska begs for his life, and the mysterious woman grants him a cheat skill called Save and Reset before vanishing. Kiska is left panicking, having absolutely no clue how to use it. Before he can figure it out, the bugbear smashes Kiska, sending him flying across the room. For a second, our protagonist looks completely dead, a total gonzo. But then Kiska suddenly snaps his eyes open. He's completely fine without a scratch, sitting there wondering how the heck he's still breathing. But before he can even process what's happening, the bugbear closes the distance and bops him into oblivion with a single punch. Zap! Kiska wakes up again, totally lost. His brain is trying to connect the dots because he knows he just got turned into pancake mix by that monster. Yet here he is, fully intact. The bugbear kills him again, and Kiska is left scratching his head, wondering what kind of glitch in the matrix he's stuck in. Every single time he kicks the bucket, he just wakes up right back at the start. He dies over and over like a bad joke, but slowly the light bulb finally goes off in his head. He realizes that every time his light ball hits 0, he's actually rewinding time to right before his death. It's all thanks to that save and reset skill the glowing lady hooked him up with. Even though he's getting wrecked repeatedly, our boy refuses to rage quit. He tries sprinting away, but he gets caught. He tries matrix dodging and jumping, but he still gets turned into a punching bag. Eventually, after dying so many times, Kiska literally starts begging the monster to just end him permanently so he can stop feeling the agonizing pain. His survival instincts are currently performing worse than a blindfold dart player, so he tries to access his status menu to turn off the cheat skill. But right then, flashbacks of Namia's tragedy and Darga's punchable face flood his mind. He realizes he can't let his hatred go. He won't let that anger fade. Instead of crying, our protagonist decides to actually fight back and lunges at the bugbear. That sudden burst of confidence helps him duck the first swing. But the second hit connects, and yep, he's dead again. By now, Kiska has bit the dust over 100 times, but he's finally downloading the enemy's attack patterns. He notices the bugbear always swings its right arm first. If he squats like he's doing a gym workout, he can dodge it. The next attack is a left hook, which Kiska learns to avoid by rolling to the right and hopping behind the monster's back. He tells himself to stay cool and not sprint too fast, or he'll just speedrun his own demise. Thanks to this endless loop of misery, Kiska actually starts surviving longer. He dodges the bugbear's heavy swings and lands a few punches of his own, but his slaps are weaker than a wet paper towel. He figures out he only has about a 25-second window before the bugbear gets back up, so he has to hustle. He spots some hidden treasure nearby, but it's totally useless for fighting. The monster wakes up, Kiska bolts for it, triggers a hidden floor trap, and plunges straight to his death. Want fast forward to attempt number 200. Our hero is now moving like a speedrunner on caffeine. He's got the bugbear completely figured out. He discovers that if he directly stabs the monster in its eyes, he can stretch his free time from 25 seconds to 35 seconds. He reaches the deadly trap zone, stops, and braces himself. He triggers the trap on purpose, falls onto the pit of spikes, but lands perfectly in the gap between them like a total boss and survives. Finally, after a ridiculous number of failed attempts, he breaks into the hidden treasure room. Inside, Kiska finds a chest and loots an item called the Crystal of Wisdom. The moment he uses it, a glowing skill menu pops up. He can only pick one skill from the list. Kiska looks at his options, thinking strategically. Healing or fire magic are useless because his body has 0 magic juice to power them. Swordsmanship and archery are also a hard pass since he doesn't even have a stick to fight with. That leaves the S-rank skills. Acceleration sounds good for a quick getaway, but he decides that stealth is the ultimate choice for staying alive. He locks in stealth and the skill activates instantly. But just as he celebrates his new power, the exit door slams shut. Glowing teleportation circles spawn all over the room, and a whole squad of bugbears appears right in front of him. There is absolutely nothing our boy can do as the mob completely swarms him and deletes him from existence once again. So inside that treasure room, our hero Kiska gets absolutely pulverized to death by 10 whole bugbears. Talk about an overkill, zap. He wakes up right back at square one, staring at the exact same first bugbear's ugly face. Our boy grinds his way back to the treasure room all over again, but this time he decides to test a different power-up. This new skill lets him see the bugbear swings in slow motion. After biting the dust around 200 times, Kiska finally realizes that the S-rank skill Stealth is totally useless when you're getting jumped by a whole squad, so he switches things up and locks in Acceleration. The speed boost actually lets him land some quick hits on the monsters. But there's a catch. His arm snaps like a dry twig, because his fragile body can't handle the insane speed. He respawns at the start again. But hey, progress is progress. The protagonist figures that if he uses the speed boost just to dodge the monsters instead of punching them, he might actually survive. So he picks Acceleration again. But then he gets so distracted by his own deep thoughts that he forgets to duck and the first bugbear bops him right on the noggin. After a ridiculous 225 attempts, Kiska finally makes it back to the treasure room. But he dies a bunch more times because he gets sloppy. He tries the speed skill again and again, but it's just not working out. By the time he reaches nearly 300 tries, he is still getting deleted no matter what he does. He tries a new tactic, like stabbing the bugbears in the eyes, but they just shrug off the pain and smash him anyway. He even sneaks behind one to choke it out, but the other 9 monsters instantly jump him. Our boy starts feeling like his brain is about as useful as a condom with holes, thinking he can't beat these things even with cheat skills. After hitting the 300 mark, Kiska realizes Acceleration is a bust, which means he has to restart the whole process. Back in the treasure room, he feels too depressed to even pick a skill, knowing that the second he touches the menu, the monster squad will just spawn and punch him instantly. But right then, memories of Namia's sad smile and Darga's creepy face flash in his mind. His anger flares up, and he realizes his pure, unadulterated hatred is the only engine keeping him running. He is absolutely determined to bust out of this dungeon and get his sweet revenge. So our boy keeps grinding, testing different skills against the mob. Around attempt number 420, he takes physical strengthening for a spin. This one actually works pretty well, boosting his attack, defense, and hops, allowing him to play Frogger by jumping from one bugbear to another and taking them down. Slaying a bugbear gives him a skill point, which he immediately uses to bump the skill to level 2. Our boy finally feels a glimmer of hope, thinking that if he keeps leveling this up, he can become an unstoppable beast. But then he looks at the stats and realizes he needs 100 points for the next level, and one kill only gives him 12 points. Doing the math, he'd have to clear the whole room just for one more upgrade. Hope vanishes instantly. It feels completely impossible. By attempt number 510, Kiska is ready to just throw in the towel. But then that burning hatred for Darga and the backstabbing villagers kicks in again. His thirst for revenge keeps his corpse moving, even though he's exhausted and hurting everywhere. In his tired state, he accidentally misclicks and selects the provoke skill. Thinking it's a totally useless garbage skill, he figures he'll just let the monsters kill him so he can reset. But when he triggers it, he is shocked to see a bugbear lose its mind and crash headfirst into a wall. Kiska stands in front of another monster, taunts a third one, and watches in awe as they start beating the crap out of each other. Realizing this is his golden ticket, he uses provoke to turn the whole room into a massive royal rumble. In the end, only 2 battered bugbears are left standing. Our protagonist taunts them both at the same time. Matrix dodges their messy swings and lets them finish each other off. Finally, after 510 painful attempts, Kiska is the last man standing in the room. After finally clearing that insane room of bugbears, our hero had to book it to escape a terrifying A-rank monster called the Headless Mule. This new floor was being patrolled by the beast, and it had already turned Kiska into a human mop 10 times in a row. Luckily, his checkpoint had updated right to the spot where he beat the bugbears, meaning he didn't have to replay that whole nightmare, which honestly made him happier as a lustful old man who was watching hentai. Exploring the new area, our boy stumbled upon 3 glowing teleportation circles. Figuring he had to choose one to advance, he stepped onto the middle one without overthinking it, knowing that even if he messed up, his cheat skill would just let him try again. Zap! He teleported into an empty hallway and started walking. To his absolute shock, he found the exact same girl who gave him cheat skill earlier, now trapped behind a magical barrier. The second he touched it, the barrier shattered like cheap glass. Worried that his clumsy touch might have broken something important, Kiska asked if she was doing okay. The girl stood up, dusting herself off, and introduced herself as Eija Tsubaki, a former legendary hero who had been sealed away in this dump. Kiska told her his name, and she smiled, saying it was a nice name. Then, Asura casually told Kiska to bend down for a second. The moment our protagonist leaned over, she straight up kissed him right on the lips, catching him completely off guard. Kiska jumped back blushing, asking what the heck she was doing. Asura just smirked, explaining that it was her special way of saying thanks, and teased him by asking if he didn't like it. Kiska stayed quiet, his brain short-circuiting as he wondered what her game was. She then asked him if he wanted to bust out of this dungeon. Kiska didn't hesitate, saying yes immediately. So Egeha grabbed his hand and promised she'd get him out alive. As they ran right into the Headless Mule. But Egeha deleted the monster in a literal blink of an eye. She proudly turned to Kiska, asking if he thought she was strong. Our boy nodded, saying she was amazing, while secretly realizing that sticking to this girl like glue was his only ticket to survival. Right after, Ahipa absorbed the dead monster's remains. Kiska asked what she was doing, and she explained she was just storing it in her item box skill to use later. Kiska remembered seeing that cheat skill on his menu earlier. Moving along, Kiska asked where they were heading next, and Ahipa explained they had to reach the room of the dungeon's mini-boss. Kiska instantly started sweating, but Ezahal told him they had to smash the boss to move forward, adding that since he freed her from her seal, she would gladly fight to the death for him. Kiska smiled back, telling her that it was thanks to her skill that he was even breathing, so they were totally even. Ezahal laughed and kicked the boss door open. Inside, they were greeted by a massive S-rank golem that looked about 10 meters tall, basically a walking mountain of rocks. Kiska was terrified, his knees shaking worse as he masturbates 2 times in a single turn. The golem let out a deafening roar and got ready to smash them. Eija told Kiska to step back and not worry because she'd protect him. Our boy watched in pure awe as Eija went toe-to-toe with the giant rock monster, holding her ground so well that Kiska thought they might actually win on the first try. But then disaster struck. Araku tripped over her own feet, and the golem seized the moment, slamming its fist down. Araku tried to block, but the impact sent her flying face first into a wall. Seeing his powerhouse partner struggling, Kiska gathered his courage and used his provoke skill to make the giant golem target him instead. Araku screamed at him to stop, but it was too late. The golem swung its massive arm right at Kiska. Araku thought our protagonist was a goner, but Kiska just laughed, completely untouched. He bragged that after dying 500 times to bugbears, matrix dodging was the one thing he was actually an expert at. Seeing the golem's arm stuck in the wall from the missed swing, Kiska yelled at Eija to hit it now. Eija jumped up and unleashed her Dragon Slayer technique, cleanly splitting the 10-meter golem in half with one glorious strike. Kiska was honestly a little freaked out by her terrifying raw power, but Aja just ran over and gave him a massive victory hug. With the mini-boss finally defeated, Kiska thought things might actually be looking up for him, but deep down he knew that thinking his bad luck was over was just pure wishful thinking. After totally wrecking the giant golem, our hero and his powerhouse partners snuck through a secret passage, still hunting for a way out of that dump. They spotted a random hole in the wall and crawled right into a hidden room. Inside, the place looked surprisingly normal, like a cozy apartment with a bed, a table, a sofa, and some neat furniture. Aja looked around and figured it was probably a vampire's bedroom, specifically belonging to a high-level monster named Judith, who had turned this dungeon into her personal base. Kiska felt a bit paranoid about crashing there, worried that this Judith lady would come home and lose her mind. But Aja told him to chill out because it was totally fine. They both walked in and collapsed onto the bed to take a breather. While relaxing, Aja asked Kiska if he really thought he was a freak just because of his silver hair. Our boy thought back to how the village bullies always jumped him for it, since it meant he belonged to the Arcus tribe, the most hated group of people ever. His social life back home was deader than a dial-up internet connection, so he remembered that this was only the second time someone had ever complimented his look, the first being his late friend Namia. Aja smiled and told him she thought his silver hair actually looked super cool. She mentioned she was originally from a completely different world and asked if he believed her. Right in the middle of their deep chat, Kiska's stomach let out a massive rumble because he was absolutely starving. Aja hopped up, went into the kitchen, and started whipping up some food using fresh meat and herbs she pulled out of her magical item box. They sat down at the table and started digging in. Suddenly, our protagonist started tearing up while chewing. Honestly, his tear ducts were working harder than his actual muscles in this dungeon, but it was just because this was the first real hot meal he had eaten since getting kicked out of society. Aja looked at him worriedly and asked what was wrong, so Kiska wiped his eyes and lied through his teeth, claiming the food was just a little too spicy. Or after stuffing their faces, it was time to hit the hay. Kiska took the couch like a gentleman, leaving the big bed for Aja. Just as our boy was drifting off to sleep, Aja randomly walked over dressed in nothing but her undergarments, and climbed straight on top of him. She grabbed his hand, forced it right onto her chest, and confessed that she was totally in love with him. Aja explained that she usually handed out that save and reset cheat skill to every single sucker who entered the dungeon, but Kiska was the only guy who actually bothered to break her out of that glass tube. She tried to get romantic and make love to him right then and there, but Kiska panicked and pushed her off, explaining that his heart already belonged to someone else. Aja looked super hurt, pouted, and marched right back to her bed. Kiska lay there kicking himself, thinking he probably should have handled that way better, since he still desperately needed her power to escape this death trap. He eventually passed out, but when he opened his eyes the next morning, he got the fright of his life, staring straight at a lifeless body hanging right from the ceiling. When our hero Kiska saw Aja's lifeless body dangling there, he completely lost his mind and barfed right on the floor. His brain went straight into panic mode and he started blaming himself, thinking that if he hadn't rejected her romantic moves the night before, she'd still be breathing. Feeling like the absolute worst guy on the planet, he bolted out of the room like a scared rabbit. But during his chaotic sprint, a bunch of headless monsters spotted him and swarmed him from all sides. Talk about perfect timing. Luckily, our boy remembered he had the save and reset cheat skill that Aja gave him, so he hit the rewind button and reset his life. He wandered around the confusing maze of the dungeon until he stumbled upon her again, back inside that glass tube container. To his absolute shock, she was alive and well. Determined to fix his mistake, he smashed the glass open and promised her right then and there that he would accept her feelings this time because he really needed her help to survive. But when Aja looked at him, her face was completely blank. She didn't recognize our protagonist at all, coldly asking him who the hell he even was. When he awkwardly blurted out his name, she shrugged and told him she didn't remember him at all, adding that he smelled like hot garbage. Kiska stood there totally confused and suspicious. His brain was lagging harder than a dial-up connection on a rainy day. She looked exactly like Aja, but her vibe and tone were totally wrong. He asked her what the heck was going on, and she suddenly realized that since he had the save and reset skill, they must have met in a previous loop. But instead of being happy, she narrowed her eyes and told him that meant he was actually her enemy. Before Kiska could even open his mouth to explain, she snatched him by the neck, choking him while grunting that his enemy status was exactly why he smelled so bad to her. Kiska begged her to stop, but she wasn't having it. She warned him that even if he reset time, his soul would still carry the trauma of this moment, telling him to never get involved with her again before casually snapping his neck like a dry twig. He reset again, left shivering and wondering who Aja really was. He figured she must have a crazy split personality or something. He decided right then and there that saving her was a one-star experience he would never try again, even though he knew he'd probably end up resetting a bunch more times anyway. Here to avoid getting turned into mincemeat by the headless monsters patrolling the halls, our boy kept moving until he ended up back in that room with the 3 teleportation circles. Since the middle one led to a neck-snapping waifu, he stepped onto the left circle instead. He teleported into a completely different hallway. Walking down the path, he noticed a cozy room lit by candlelight where a fancy-looking girl was casually sipping tea. He walked up to her, and she looked up, remarking that it was super rare for a random visitor to show up in her lounge. When Kiska told her he was just a lost guy looking for a way out of this death trap, she got instantly annoyed, snapping that he was incredibly rude for interrupting her, and announcing that she was the great ancestor of all vampires. Before our hero could even say sorry, she instantly teleported right in front of his face and jabbed something incredibly sharp straight into his chest. Kiska reset all over again, waking up right at the very first starting point of the dungeon. Sitting on the cold floor, our boy finally realized that this entire dungeon wasn't just full of scary monsters. It was packed to the brim with absolute psychopaths. Kiska woke up after his latest reset, rubbing his sore neck and remembering what Aja had blabbered about earlier regarding Judith, the supreme vampire ancestor who ran this underground bunker. Refusing to let his brain cells fully fry, he marched right back to the room with the 3 teleportation circles. Having already tried the middle and left paths with disastrous results, he decided to try his luck with the right circle. He teleported onto a new floor, carefully creeping down a dark hallway until he spotted a weird room with a creepy black sword floating right in the middle of it. This wasn't just any regular blade. It literally had a giant blinking eyeball embedded in it. Now any sensible person would see a weapon looking back at them and walk away. But our boy's decision-making skills were currently functioning at the level of a toddler holding a fork near an electrical outlet. He figured he desperately needed some firepower to escape this dump, so he walked right up and grabbed it anyway. The exact second his fingers touched the grip, a wave of agonizing pain ripped through his entire body. It felt like his veins were full of hot sauce, and he couldn't even loosen his grip to drop the thing. The torture felt like it lasted a century, until Kiska finally blacked out from the sheer shock. When our protagonist finally blinked his eyes open, he discovered that the sketchy eyeball sword had literally fused into his right arm. To make things worse, the weapon felt ridiculously heavy, anchoring his limbs straight to the floor. His right arm was now completely paralyzed under the weight, making him look like a guy trying to carry a boulder with a single toothpick. Kiska groaned, thinking the sword was totally useless, since he could barely even lift himself up. He had no choice but to awkwardly drag the heavy metal blade behind him like a broken toy. But as he was limping along, a fierce werewolf jumped out of the shadows. Terrified out of his mind, Kiska tried to bolt, but the sword suddenly took the driver's seat. It forcefully yanked our boy forward with insane speed and stabbed the werewolf straight through the chest, deleting the monster instantly. Kiska realized this weapon definitely had a mind of its own. But honestly, he didn't give a crap about its sketchy vibes as long as it helped him escape this hellhole. He went on a mini rampage, testing his new living arm blade on other random monsters, and for the first time he felt like an unstoppable badass who could take on the world. However, eventually he stumbled upon a massive set of metal doors. Our protagonist figured this was another mini-boss room, just like the one where he faced the giant rock golem. Stepping inside, he came face to face with a legendary griffin that looked absolutely ripped. The moment the beast woke up, it dove straight at him with killer intent. But Kiska's sword moved on its own again, yanking him out of the danger zone just in the nick of time. The griffin tried to shred him to pieces with its giant chicken-like claws, but Kiska let the sword handle the defense, blocking every strike until he finally sliced the monster up for good. With the griffin turned into bird feed, a hidden door groaned open at the back of the arena, revealing a secret room. Kiska smiled, genuinely believing his dark days were over and that nothing could stop his grand escape now. But as he proudly strutted into the hidden room, the black sword suddenly started feeling heavier and heavier with every step, dragging his energy down to zero. He pushed through the exhaustion and stepped into the main chamber, only to freeze solid. Standing right there was Judith, the scary vampire ancestor from before. Kiska gasped, demanding to know why the heck she was crashing his victory party, his hope instantly evaporating all over again. Our hero stared down the vampire queen and demanded to know what the hell she wanted from him. Judith sighed and explained that she actually just wanted to destroy that sketchy parasitic sword fused to his arm. She revealed it was a cursed, dangerous blade that literally eats people and monsters for breakfast, adding that she had hidden it away in that room, assuming no regular dummy would ever wander into this dungeon. Kiska panicked, asking if that meant she was going to delete him along with the sword, but Judith didn't even bother answering. Instead, she casually ripped off her own left arm and molded it into a glowing blood sword. Before Kiska could even process how gross that was, she instantly grew a brand new left arm and charged straight at him. Luckily, the parasitic sword on Kiska's arm took the wheel, acting like an automated shield to block her incoming slaps. But Judith wasn't playing around. He tossed her blood blade high into the air, causing it to multiply into a rain of sharp blades that rained down and poked our boy full of holes. Because his single arm sword obviously couldn't block 100 angles at once. That overkill spam was Judith's ultimate move, and using it actually drained her so much that her left arm completely vanished for a bit. Our boy reset all over again, waking up back in the very first starting room. Kiska was feeling incredibly frustrated because his brain was currently running slower than a turtle stuck in thick molasses. No matter which magic circle he picked, he just kept speed-running his own demise. If he took the middle path, he'd run into Aja, who would choke him out because he smelled funky to her. If he went left, Judith would instantly turn him into a pincushion. If he went right, the parasitic sword made him punch hard, but it was slowly eating his body alive. After overthinking it, our protagonist decided the right circle was still his best bet. He figured he could just use the sword's auto-defend mode to carry him past Judith and whatever other freaks were lurking around. So he rushed back to the right circle, grabbed the creepy eyeball sword again, and let it fuse into his arm to grow stronger, praying to the heavens that he wouldn't run into the vampire queen this time. When he teleported, luck was finally on his side. Judith was nowhere to be seen. Instead, the room was packed to the brim with angry werewolves. Kiska went to town, slicing them up like a chef to feed their juices to his hungry blade. But his victory lap didn't last long. Judith eventually tracked him down anyway, only to find that half of Kiska's body had completely turned pitch black because the cursed sword was taking over his mind. Seeing him turn into a zombie, she effortlessly deleted him yet again. Back at the start, Kiska was seething with rage, realizing that no matter how many monster buffets he fed that stupid sword, he still couldn't touch Judith. He kept resetting and racking his brain until a wild, desperate idea finally popped into his head. He marched right back to the left circle to meet the vampire ancestor face to face. The moment he spawned in her tea room, before she could even stab him, our boy blurted out a crazy request, asking her if she would please stop killing him and just make him her disciple instead. Judith actually smirked when she heard Kiska's crazy request. She looked pretty interested, which made our hero feel a tiny bit hopeful for once, but then she ruined the mood by asking what exactly she would get in return for doing him a favor. That question completely stumped Kiska. Desperate to survive, he offered to become her ultimate foot soldier and follow her every single command like a puppy. Judith found that answer completely boring, and without a second thought, she sliced him up to end his life. Kiska reset right back to the start, but instead of crying, our boy was actually hyped. He realized that this might finally be his golden ticket out of this hellhole. To escape this dungeon, he needed to stop being weak, and becoming Judith's apprentice seemed like his best bet. Sure, she was terrifying, but she wasn't completely impossible to talk to. He figured if he could just offer her something she actually wanted, he might stand a chance. The next time he sprinted to her room, he offered to be a loyal friend she could vent to. Judith didn't buy that garbage for a second and was about to erase him again, but Kiska begged her to wait, screaming that he had more to offer. Surprisingly, she spared his life just to hear him out. Kiska proudly told her that he had worked in the dirt for years and was super good at digging out secret hideaways. Judith was completely unimpressed. She lifted her massive tea table with pure killing intent, telling him she could build way better stuff with her magic. Kiska admitted she was right, but his brain was currently working on a single backup battery, so he couldn't think of anything else. Finally, he just stood up and told her the absolute truth. He just wanted to get out of this dungeon alive. He explained the whole sob story of how he got framed and exiled, but Judith didn't give a crap about his feelings. That's when Kiska bared his teeth and told her about his burning thirst for revenge, explaining how he wanted to hunt down, torture, and kill every single villager who had wronged him. He begged for her help, and Judith actually found his dark side pretty amusing. She decided she wanted to stick around to see what kind of monster our boy would turn into. Kiska felt a wave of happiness, but Judith instantly warned him not to get too cocky. He could only become her student if he passed a crazy entry test. She asked if he had used a magic circle to reach her, and Kiska admitted he took the left one. Judith explained that once you step on a circle in this dungeon, you're usually trapped, but then she showed him a hidden doorway in the room that led to a totally secret route. Kiska was completely shocked by how clueless he had been. Judith led our protagonist down to a dead end and opened another secret wall, bringing them right back to that room with the creepy black parasitic sword. She explained that she had always wanted to destroy the blade, but she couldn't even touch it because of its gross parasitic nature. Since Kiska had already used it in past timelines, he knew exactly what she meant. He asked her what he was supposed to do, and she dropped the bomb, telling him he had to completely conquer the sword's mind and learn to control it to pass her test. Kiska asked if that was even humanly possible, and Judith straight up admitted she was 99% sure he would fail and die. Still, she didn't give him a choice, reminding him that if he said no, she'd just kill him herself. Kiska had no choice but to agree. Following her wild instructions, he grabbed the sword directly by the sharp blade and pulled it out of its floating spot. It hurt like hell, but surprisingly not as bad as the first time. Then Judith gave him the most unhinged command ever. She told him to swallow the entire sword. Kiska was completely horrified, but knowing a reset was his only safety net, he stuffed the blade down his throat. Suddenly, his mind entered a deep spiritual world. He saw the giant eyeball staring at him and demanded to become its absolute master. The sword actually spoke back, noting that they were inside Kiska's inner soul. When our hero demanded its power for his revenge, the sword surprisingly agreed without throwing a tantrum. It mentioned that Kiska's soul smelled weirdly familiar, so it decided to tag along. Kiska snapped back to reality, waking up to see Judith looking completely dumbfounded. She honestly expected him to explode into pieces, but our boy had successfully tamed the cursed blade. Judith praised him for surviving the impossible and officially welcomed him as her apprentice. Our hero's strange new life as a vampire student was just getting started. Now that Kiska was officially Judith's disciple, he spent the night at the exact same vampire hideout where he previously stayed with Yahello. Thankfully, since this dungeon apparently had more hidden rooms than a shady hotel, they didn't have to share a bed and slept in separate rooms. The next morning, our boy went looking for Judith, but accidentally walked in on her while she was still asleep in an outfit that left absolutely nothing to the imagination. His face turned redder than a ripe tomato. When Judith finally blinked her eyes open and casually greeted him, Kiska bowed so low his nose almost touched his balls, trying his absolute best not to stare at her body because his eyes literally had no safe place to look. Judith smirked and told him she was about to start his brutal training, asking if he was actually ready for the pain. Our boy, trying to act like a tough protagonist, nodded and said he was prepared for literally anything she threw at him, no matter how impossible. Judith smiled and went to change out of her cloths. While she was getting ready, she asked Kiska what kind of skills he was rocking. Kiska awkwardly admitted that his only real combat ability was provocation, a skill so garbage that even Judith openly mocked it for being pretty useless. Of course, our boy kept his save and reset cheat skill a total secret, because you don't just brag about your time travel powers to a vampire queen. Judith then kicked open a hidden door, bragging that she knew every single secret passage by heart because she'd been stuck living in this dungeon for a whopping 1,000 years. Kiska's jaw dropped, realizing his brain had actually made a smart choice for once by picking her as a mentor. She led him into a room with a treasure chest, and Kiska popped it open to pull out another crystal of wisdom. A list of skills popped up, and while most were the same old stuff, a few new high-level options were glowing. Not wanting to waste a free upgrade, Kiska asked Judith for her expert advice, and she told him to lock in swordsmanship without hesitation. She explained that since that creepy living sword was now fused inside his body, he'd need proper sword skills just to control it when he summoned it out of his arm. Kiska got all hyped and clicked buy. Judith told him they needed to dive even deeper into the dungeon to grab his next skill upgrade. Even though they sneaked past most of the scary monsters, Kiska's anxiety was through the roof as they crept through the dark hidden tunnels toward the lowest level. They finally reached another chest, but Judith stopped him, warning that this one was a total gamble. She explained that the chest was enchanted by some crazy lady with a million different abilities, meaning whatever skill Kiska pulled out would be completely random. Kiska took a deep breath, opened it, and got slapped with attribute granting, a rare skill that was currently as useful to him as a screen door on a submarine, since he had zero magic juice to power it. Judith patted him on the back and told him to cheer up, saying he'd unlock magic skills later anyway, so it wasn't a big deal. As they turned around to head back, Kiska spotted a massive, terrifying door at the end of the hall and asked what was behind it. Judith got serious, explaining that it was the official boss room and the only exit out of the entire dungeon. Kiska asked if beating the boss meant they could finally leave this hellhole, and Judith confirmed it, but dropped a massive reality check. The boss was a god-tier SS rank monster, and she had been failing to beat it for 50 straight years. To finally bust out, she told Kiska he needed to grind until he was just as strong as her, so they could jump the boss together. However, back at the hideout, Judith decided to show off her blood manipulation powers. She casually sliced her own wrist and molded her splashing blood into a sharp dagger. Kiska winced, remembering this technique vividly, since he had already died to it multiple times in past lives. She told him he could do the exact same trick with the sword living inside his veins if he just focused his mind on it. Kiska closed his eyes, concentrated real hard, and actually managed to summon the blade, instantly unlocking two new overpowered skills called Lord of Parasitic Puppet Sword and Black Sword. Our boy was feeling pretty proud of himself, looking like a real anime hero. But then Judith dropped his first real homework assignment. From now on, whenever he saw her face, he had to try his absolute best to land a physical hit on her. She promised that if he managed to scratch her even once, his basic training would be complete. Kiska panicked, worried he might accidentally hurt her, but Judith got instantly annoyed by his hesitation. She rolled her eyes, telling him she could heal herself in a blink, and mocked him for being a total wimp for thinking a weakling like him could actually damage a vampire queen. Kiska tried to tell her to calm down, but she didn't want to hear it, and instantly lunged at him with pure violence. Judith unleashed a relentless storm of attacks, and Kiska quickly realized he had made a massive mistake. Thanks to his new swordsmanship skills, he barely managed to dodge her deadly strikes, but he knew he couldn't win this fight by just playing defense forever. Deciding to go on the attack, our protagonist swung straight for her head, but she matrix evaded him like it was nothing. Her speed and strength were absolutely insane, especially when she wielded her giant sword, but suddenly she switched to using a smaller dagger, and Kiska spotted a tiny opening. Our boy blocked her quick strike and launched a lightning-fast counterattack, actually managing to leave a tiny cut on her arm. He immediately started panicking and apologizing for hurting her, but Judith just burst out laughing, saying it was just a tiny scratch she could heal instantly. She praised him for actually completing the impossible task and admitted that his weird, chaotic fighting style wasn't like other guys she'd fought. When Kiska awkwardly told her that he literally had zero real combat experience before entering the dungeon, Judith smiled and called him a natural-born prodigy, though Kiska secretly knew he was just a guy who had died 500 times to get this good. Our hero is up against a squad of headless mules today, and let's be real, these aren't your average training dummies. These things are the real deal. They rush him all at once, but our boy is actually blocking every single swipe like a total pro. Still, Judith is standing in the back completely unimpressed. She randomly chucks a dagger straight at him, scolding him about his trash form and yelling that he needs to keep his guard way tighter when he's getting jumped by a crowd. Kiska listens, fixes his stance on the fly, and honestly, it feels pretty great when he starts swatting their attacks away smoothly. Judith smirks and yells that it's time to stop playing defense and start swinging, since these mules have completely run out of magic juice and are basically sitting ducks against his living blade. She urges him to go all out and show no mercy. Our protagonist takes the lead, slicing down the first mule on the left before spinning around to delete the one on his right. He spots a cowardly mule trying to book it for the exit and puts an end to that one too. Judith is actually impressed for once, and Kiska is totally pumped, thanking her for the solid advice. Judith rolls her eyes and reminds him that she only keeps him around because she needs him alive, warning him that if his squishy self dies, she'll be stuck in this cave for another 50 years, so he better stay sharp. For all that hard labor, our boy racks up some sweet skill points, and Judith tells him to go ahead and level up. Kiska gets stoked when he checks his menu and sees his skill slots are completely full. He figures his swordsmanship and parasitic abilities are the only things keeping him from becoming Monster Chow, so he decides to upgrade those first. After doing some quick mental math, which is a miracle since his brain usually operates like a potato clock, he realizes he needs 30 more SP for his sword skill and 70 for the parasitic sword. He tells Judith he's dumping his points into swordsmanship first, and she nods, agreeing with the play. With the grunts cleared, they decide to call it a day and hike back to the hideout. Later on, Kiska brings Judith a fresh cup of tea, apologizing for being late like a good little butler. Ever since he became her disciple, his job description expanded from student to full-time servant. He's not just brewing tea, he's also responsible for hunting down fresh monster blood because she's obsessed with chugging it out of fancy teacups. Judith takes a sip and demands to know what's for dinner, so Kiska hands her a plate of cooked headless mule steak. She is absolutely not thrilled, complaining that they ate the exact same garbage yesterday. Kiska apologizes, explaining that the dungeon is fresh out of supermarkets and seasoning, but mentions that he at least found some weird wriggling trees and chopped them up into a salad. Judith wrinkles her nose, snapping that she hates salad and that those wriggling trees taste like dirt. Kiska sighs, warning her that she's going to end up totally malnourished if she doesn't eat her green veggies. Judith, flexing her vampire privileges, insists that vampires don't need human nutrients. Kiska isn't having it though. He steps out and comes back with a handful of sweet dryad fruits, which instantly makes Judith super hyped. He explains that he found them while picking leaves earlier and originally wanted to let them grow a bit bigger, but today just felt like a special occasion. As they chew, Kiska grumbles that he wishes he had some actual salt and pepper, but Judith replies that if they could just bust out of this dungeon, she'd hook them up with gourmet ingredients. Kiska asks how she used to leave the place back in the day, and she explains that for a vampire, dungeons are like a cozy safe space, and there used to be a special teleportation circle that let her skip in and out whenever she wanted, but then some jerk destroyed it, trapping her inside forever. Kiska asks who the culprit was, but she admits she has no clue. Suddenly, Judith has a massive realization, muttering that whoever sealed that hero girl Aja in the glass container probably smashed the teleportation circle too, just to keep her locked away. Kiska shudders, his skin crawling. He asks how Judith even knows about Aja, and she casually drops a massive truth bomb, mentioning that Aja is the actual legendary hero who clapped the Demon King. Kiska is completely shocked because the history books back home always claimed a guy named Elysium was the savior, but now he's learning Aja was the true MVP. Kiska then asks why Judith herself is sealed here, but she admits she doesn't know that part either. She sternly warns him to never ever mess with Aja's seal, because even though she saved the world from the demons, Aja's raw power is so unhinged it could easily destroy the entire planet. Kiska nods and agrees, but secretly, his heart does a nervous flip as he remembers he already broke that exact seal in a different timeline, praying it won't come back to bite him. Trying to change the subject, Kiska asks Judith if she pigged out and ate his share of the dryad fruits. Judith smirks, lying through her teeth that she didn't touch them. Our boy teases her about her sweet tooth, but she turns serious, denying it completely and barking at him to shut up and go to bed. Kiska walks off feeling like a total glorified slave to this vampire queen, but hey, at least he's alive and not complaining. After months of sweating and grinding, our hero Kiska proudly tells Judith that he's finally leveled up his swordsmanship skill to level 3. Judith looks surprised, noting that their big escape might actually be way closer than she thought. Kiska gets totally fired up, bragging that he's going to get so ridiculously strong he'll break them both out of this hellhole for good. She just laughs, honestly impressed by how much our boy has grown from a weak little farmer into a real fighter. Kiska steps out to skin a dead monster for materials, while Judith heads back to the hideout by herself. Our boy finishes up and walks back into the room, but he picks the absolute worst possible moment. He catches Judith completely naked. She quickly scrambles to cover herself up, and Kiska turns into a blushing mess, running off while screaming apologies for his terrible timing. Judith just bursts out laughing though, totally teasing him for panicking like a little kid. Later that night, after stuffing their faces with dinner, Kiska awkwardly offers to go sleep in his own separate room to keep things polite. But Judith stops him, asking if he wants to sleep in her bed instead, because she just doesn't want to be lonely tonight. Kiska lets out a nervous laugh, feeling like an absolute jerk if he turns down a vampire queen, so he agrees to crash next to her. As they lie down together under the blankets, Kiska thinks back to the first day he met her, remembering how he used to think she was the scariest monster alive. Now, she's literally lying right next to him, and his brain is short-circuiting because the whole situation feels so weird. Kiska randomly asks if she really planned to delete him from existence when they first met, and Judith gasps, totally shocked that he somehow figured that out. Our protagonist just chuckles, thinking that he only knows because she literally killed him a bunch of times in his past timelines. Judith actually looks guilty and apologizes, explaining that she always had to be on high alert because every single person she ever met tried to murder her. Kiska smiles and assures her that he doesn't hate her for it at all, adding that everything he is today is 100% because of her training. Judith looks deeply relieved to hear that and, leaning in, asks him what exactly went through his mind when he saw her without any clothes on earlier. Kiska stammers like a broken record, blushing as he mumbles that she looked absolutely beautiful. Judith gets a huge kick out of this, teasing him to give her even more compliments. And when our boy awkwardly admits he thought about even more than that, she wears a massive smirk. She leans closer, teasingly asking what exactly he would do if she offered to show him her entire body all over again, leaving our virgin protagonist sweating bullets. Even with a gorgeous vampire queen practically throwing herself at him, Kiska can't stop thinking about Namia and Ajaha. His brain is a total messy traffic jam of old crushes. He's really tempted to reject Judith's spicy offer, but his survival instincts finally kick in, and he gets worried about what she'll do if he shuts her down. So he awkwardly gets up from the bed and tells her that his life right now really isn't so bad. Judith smiles and agrees with him, but inside, our boy is secretly terrified. He figures that if he keeps living like this, too comfortable, cozy, and easy, the revengeful spirit inside him will completely melt away. Back when those ugly bugbears kept turning him into a human mop over and over, he cursed his awful fate. But now he's strong enough to smack monsters around, and he even has a cute girl by his side. Still, he knows he can't just play house forever. He looks at her and confesses his love to Judith, but immediately follows it up with an apology, explaining that he's just not ready for a real relationship yet. Judith, being surprisingly chill, says she gets it and gives him a soft kiss. Kiska realizes just how much he truly loves her, but he knows he needs to handle his business and settle some scores back home before he can ever move forward. Judith looks at him and promises that they will totally pick up where they left off once he finally gets his sweet revenge. Hearing that makes Kiska incredibly happy. Judith really truly understands his dark side. Then, out of absolutely nowhere, a shadowy figure spawns right behind Judith. In one swift, brutal motion, they clean decapitate the vampire queen. Our protagonist is frozen in absolute shock as Judith's head rolls across the floor like a deflated soccer ball. He literally cannot believe his eyes. He looks up from the horror, and his jaw drops as he sees Ajaha standing right next to him, staring down with a creepy gaze and asking him why the hell he didn't just choose her, adding that she never wanted things to end like this with Judith. Ajaha starts cursing Kiska and completely loses her mind, going full psycho mode. Our hero is panicking big time because Ajaha is supposed to be locked up tight in her glass container, making this whole situation feel like a twisted nightmare where she's forcing him into another save and reset loop. Right then, Judith's decapitated head rolls on the floor and yells at Kiska to book it because Ajaha is too dangerous. Our boy is standing there frozen in total shock, his brain lagging harder than a potato computer trying to run a high-end video game, completely unable to process how Ajaha is even alive and kicking. But Ajaha gets absolutely furious at Judith for opening her mouth and marches over to finish the job. Kiska desperately wants to yell and stop her, but his throat is so tight he can't even squeeze out a single word. After Ajaha brutally finishes off Judith for good, she spins around to face Kiska, casually confesses her undying love for him, and drives a blade straight into his chest. As he collapses, she glares down and warns him that if she ever catches his cheating self with another chick again, she will never ever forgive him. Kiska lies there bleeding out on the cold floor, his vision fading as he wonders if his journey is really going to end like this after all the crazy stuff he went through. But then Kiska snaps his eyes open and wakes up yet again, this time surrounded by a pile of dead monsters. He sits up totally confused, having absolutely no clue how far back in time his cheat skill just rolled him. He quickly opens up his status menu to check his stats, and his heart sinks straight into his shoes. He only has the save and reset skill and his garbage taunt skill at level 1. Every single other high-level skill slot is completely empty. Our protagonist feels totally crushed, realizing that those months of hard work and bonding with Judith have been completely wiped out like a deleted save file. He breaks down and starts crying right there, remembering every single detail of his training, and honestly, he misses her like crazy. But despite getting his progress completely reset to 0, our boy wipes his tears and decides he's going to fight his way back to go see her all over again. Kiska steps right back onto the teleportation circle, crossing his fingers and praying that Judith will somehow remember him this time. He sprints down the hallway toward her room, feeling a little excited that he might get his vampire waifu back. But the moment he bursts inside, she just repeats her usual NPC lines, saying she is completely surprised to see a random intruder in her lounge. Kiska's heart instantly sinks into his stomach. She has completely forgotten him. Still, our boy refuses to rage quit just yet. He desperately asks if she remembers him and blurts out his name, hoping it'll trigger a flashback. But Judith has absolutely no clue who he is. Kiska feels like his brain is about to melt and starts crying right there. His love life is currently emptier than a vending machine in a zombie apocalypse. He realizes he has to start his entire relationship grind right from scratch, all over again. Judith notices him blubbering and asks if he's doing okay, but our defeated protagonist just drops to his knees and bows flat on the floor in front of her. He has done this exact song and dance so many times now, and his heart just keeps getting shattered into a million pieces. He looks up and begs her to make him her martial arts disciple, which catches her completely off guard. He just wants to start fresh and be by her side again, planning to level up, become her student, and eventually bust out of this hellhole together. He knows there's a massive chance she might just lose her patience and murder him again, but our boy is determined to loop time over and over if it means sticking with her. Well, but right as he raises his head, his jaw drops. Judith's head is suddenly no longer attached to her neck. It's rolling on the ground, and her lifeless corpse collapses onto the floor. Aja spawns right behind her, looking as completely batshit crazy as ever. She literally kept her psycho promise. If she ever caught Kiska flirting with another chick, she wouldn't forgive him. Without a single second of hesitation, she drives her sword straight through Kiska's neck, deleting his life bar instantly. As Kiska lies there dying, a light bulb finally goes off in his head. He realizes he can't even breathe near Judith anymore, because if he tries to hook up with her, Aja will just spawn and kill them both. But hey, he learned a ton of combat skills from her in the past loops, and even if he can't see her face again, he still carries everything she taught him in his muscle memory. He finally believes he can escape this dungeon completely on his own, silently thanking Judith for everything she did for him as he fades out. Kiska is totally pumped up now, determined to use every single combat trick Judith beat into him to finally bust out of this dungeon. He marches right up to that creepy puppet sword, grabs it straight by the sharp blade instead of the hilt, and swallows the whole thing like a total maniac. Down in his soul world, the sword greets him, muttering that it feels like they've met somewhere before. Kiska remembers hearing that exact same line from the blade last time, so he thinks back to the weapon, demanding it to stop stalling and lend him its cheat powers. But the sword pauses, wondering out loud what it should actually do. Kiska instantly starts sweating, getting worried because the blade agreed right away in the last timeline, making him wonder why its tiny brain is hesitating now. That's when the sword drops a bomb, revealing it has its own personal bucket list. It wants to become a real human. It explains that it usually feeds off people like a nasty parasite, and if it could just take over a meat suit completely, it might finally achieve its dream. Kiska, desperate to make a deal, tells the blade that if it just lets him control his own body now, it can totally become human later. The sword isn't quite sure about the math on that, since it has mind-controlled plenty of suckers before but never tried actually becoming a person. But it figures that obeying Kiska might actually get it closer to its goal. Kiska asks if this means the weapon is finally going to hand over the power, and the sword happily agrees, cheering that it feels like it's destined to be our boy's loyal tool. Our protagonist is stoked that he officially controls the puppet sword again and can finally fight back. He heads out into the halls, eager to grind and level up his swordsmanship. He remembers the chest with the random skill, but since that thing sits right in front of the final boss room, he knows that path is a total suicide mission. Plus, last time he got that garbage attribute granting skill and never even used it, so his brain cells actually work for once, and he decides to just hunt whatever weak monsters he can find to boost his basic sword stats. He goes on a hunting spree, slicing up headless mules left and right, and after half a day of hard labor, his swordsmanship skill hits level 2. But since he completely wiped out all the local spawns, he realizes it'll take forever for new ones to pop up. He considers heading over to the werewolf zone next, but immediately checks himself. Judith hangs out in that area a lot, and his luck is currently more fragile than a glass phone case, so he can't risk bumping into her. They aren't buddies in this timeline, and if she spots him, she might delete him on sight. Even worse, if by some miracle they did get cozy, Psycho Aja would instantly spawn to turn them into mincemeat, so it's way better to stay far away from the vampire queen. As Kiska stands there wondering what his next move should be, his arm sword randomly speaks up, calling him master and asking what's bothering him. Both our hero and the blade jump in shock. The stupid thing can actually talk out loud now. The sword admits it thought the voice upgrade would take way longer, but since their souls are so ridiculously compatible, it happened way ahead of schedule. Kiska wonders if their weird user and tool relationship is what triggered this talkative feature. The sword asks again what's on his mind, so Kiska admits he desperately needs to farm more skill points, asking for the absolute best grinding spot in the house. The sword smirks, mentioning it knows a golden spot, and offers to play GPS. It tells Kiska to follow its exact directions, guiding him straight to a secret passage that leads down to the second stage. Kiska plays around with the wall, searching for a switch, and finally clicks it, opening up the hidden tunnel. Kiska asks how his sword even knows these map hacks, and the blade explains that one of its previous dead masters stumbled onto it by accident. As they walk through the dark path, Kiska nervously wonders if Judith knows about this shortcut, but the sword just warns him to brace himself because the monsters ahead are going to be seriously dangerous. Luckily, our boy is so used to getting wrecked that the sword just laughs at his completely chill attitude. Suddenly, the stone door slams shut behind Kiska, locking him in, and a bunch of glowing teleportation circles appear out of thin air. Monsters start pouring out ready for a brawl, which is honestly a perfect chance for our protagonist to rack up some sweet X-bake. The entire room fills up with glowing golden living armor suits. Kiska counts them, flexing his inner anime hero as he tells himself that since there are only 20 of them, this fight is going to be a total walk in the park. He isn't scared even a little bit, though he briefly wonders why his cowardly self feels so ridiculously confident. The sword asks if he genuinely thinks he can win this Royal Rumble, and Kiska honestly admits he isn't entirely sure, but hey, he has a solid game plan. He's faced way worse killers, and after dying hundreds of times, he literally does not fear death anymore. So our boy grips the living sword with both hands, ready to face the golden mob, looking at the tough monsters and deciding that compared to what he's been through, these guys are just total weaklings. Gornohiro squares up right in front of 3 glowing golden armors, with a grand total of 20 shiny tin cans he needs to turn into scrap metal. Sure, these guards are jacked, but our boy thinks he's totally invincible now that he's flexing his trusty talking black sword. One yellow armored guard takes a massive swing, but Kiska blocks it like a pro, wearing a smug smile as the guard charges right back at him. See, the werewolves Kiska fought before were all unarmed, meaning his luck was actually doing okay for once. But these guards are packing heat, which makes them a massive pain to deal with. Trying to be a total edgelord, Kiska starts mocking the guards, taunting them to rush him all at once and calling them absolute weaklings just to bait them into attacking harder. The armors don't come slow at all, instantly swarming him, while his sword glazes him up, complimenting him for being totally overpowered. Kiska brags back that he's a beast in group battles, though he casually admits he has no idea how his skills actually work in a solo 1v1. He remembers the golden rule of gaming. Monsters that die from friendly fire don't give you any experience points, meaning you can't farm sweet skill points when you're fighting alongside your besties. With the power of friendship, you can only thin out the enemy numbers quickly, which is bad for his grind. Once so, our boy taunts the guards again like a total clown. Big mistake. Suddenly, the entire squad of 20 moves like a coordinated esports team and surrounds him from every single angle. He has zero room to escape or swing his weapon. They all lunge together, beat him into a pulp, and send his squishy self right back to the very start of the level. Kiska sits there trying to cope with the massive embarrassment, realizing he has taken way too many L's at this point. First, the furries killed him, and now the shiny metal boys. He has literally died 100 times so far, yet his decision-making skills are still operating on a single % of battery life. But our protagonist pushes through the shame and stands right back up. He's going to run it back because nothing can break his spirit. Never backing down and never giving up is just his whole vibe now. Kiska walks back through the confusing stone maze, presses a random wall block, and reveals the hidden passage. The black sword is genuinely impressed, mentioning how Kiska seems to know so many map hacks, but Kiska just readies his blade to fight the enemies waiting in front of him. And then he does the unthinkable. He straight up dies again and again and again, speedrunning his own demise like a true expert. But he sticks to his guns and keeps pushing his luck. After a ridiculous number of failed attempts, Kiska lets out a massive sigh and finally decides to use his brain. He honestly didn't think things would turn into such a brutal grind, especially since he was just living a cozy, peaceful life with Judith Sama a few timelines ago. He resets and finds himself standing inside his deep soul world again, staring right at a dark, blurry figure. This black shape is actually his sword, but it's starting to look weirdly human-like. Kiska points at it, mentioning that the blade looks way more human now than before, and the sword agrees, telling him it noticed the weird changes too. Turns out the more Kiska resets and meets the blade in the soul room, the more human it becomes. Kiska starts to think that maybe this sketchy sword has completely escaped the Matrix, since its memory doesn't actually reset every single time our protagonist gets deleted in the real world. Kiska tells the weapon it's a great thing it's taking on a human form, since its ultimate life goal is to become a real person anyway. The sword suddenly pauses, getting super suspicious, and asks Kiska how the heck he could possibly know its deepest secret. Our hero almost gets caught in 4K right there. Panicking, he pulls a total lie out of his hat, claiming he has a special superpower that lets him just read people's life goals. The sword is completely amazed by this fake skill and starts totally glazing Kiska, hyping up his hard work and saying it can't wait to work alongside him. With the team up locked in, Kiska walks back into the monster room, and the golden armors spawn in. It might be their very first time seeing his face in this current loop, but our boy has been brutally defeated by them more times than he can count. They might be huge and they might be strong, but our protagonist vows he will never stop winning. Kiska screams for his black sword, activates his weapon, and dives right back into the meat grinder. Our hero readies himself for battle yet again, wearing a smug smile because he genuinely believes this will be his absolute last time fighting these shiny tin cans. He vows he is going to end this cycle right now, though his talking sword immediately calls his bluff, telling him to quit acting tough. Our boy kicks off the round using his favorite garbage skill, Taunt, mocking the enemies like a loudmouth so they lose their cool and charge at him at full speed. 3 golden guards sprint forward, but Kiska uses their own clumsy momentum against them, setting up a beautiful friendly fire trap. But before the monsters can accidentally smash each other, Kiska slides in, steals the kills himself, and racks up some sweet points. The black sword completely glazes him, praising how god-tier his reaction time is, so Kiska brags back that he has the enemy's exact attack patterns completely downloaded. The sword is totally amazed by his big brain energy, but Kiska is busy planning the whole map inside his head. He knows that while he is busy yapping to the weapon, a sneaky guard will try to launch a surprise attack from behind. Luckily, our protagonist is 2 steps ahead of their silly little game. He effortlessly dodges the predicted backstab and spins around to coolly slice straight through the enemy armor. Just like that, Kiska has successfully deleted 2 more guards, and everything is going perfectly according to his script, where Boy happily destroys the monsters one by one, while a glowing holographic scoreboard shines in the air, notifying him every single time he farms some juicy XP. Kiska pauses to check his stats, and realizes these high-level guards give an absolute mountain of points, letting him level up his build like crazy. Spending his hard-earned points, Kiska upgrades his weapon, turning the black blade into a massive, pulsating greatsword. Our hero is way too happy because the physical weight of the weapon has suddenly decreased, meaning his noodle arms can actually lift it now. Even better, this new greatsword will literally fight for Kiska and forcefully pull his body straight into battle using an overpowered skill called the Swift Dragon Thrust. They charge together into the remaining mob like a true anime duo. Kiska complements the sword's insane firepower, and the sword glazes him right back, hyping up how they are the ultimate dream team. Looking back at his previous embarrassing deaths, Kiska spots all the weaknesses from his last failed rounds, easily fixes his mistakes, and keeps slicing away until only a tiny handful of enemies are left standing. But just as he thinks he's about to clear the map, the floor shakes and a brand new monster spawn right in front of him. Kiska is completely unaware of what this thing is, and his dumb greatsword casually admits it forgot to mention the actual floor boss. A terrifying SS-class monster slowly reveals itself from the shadows, the legendary Knight Rider. Our protagonist's confidence vanishes instantly, and he is left doing some major mental coping all over again. Our boy Kiska looks at the giant boss and asks his sword if they can actually defeat this thing, but the weapon just tells him that it all depends on his own skills. It casually mentions how its last master got completely wrecked and died to this very boss, but hey, no biggie. Kiska scoffed, bragging that he is simply built different and is way better than the dead guy. Our protagonist honestly thinks he is a total Sigma male, believing he can handle the puppet sword arts way better than the previous owner. The sword just feeds right into his massive Delulu, and Kiska keeps believing in himself. He has fought plenty of battles using this puppet style, so he vows he won't get deleted by some ordinary enemy. The Knight Rider charges straight at Kiska, but our boy blocks the heavy attack. The boss still has his golden henchman by his side, so Kiska realizes he needs to clear out the trash first, deciding to take them all out in a single strike. Kiska unleashes his special attack, the wind-cutting scythe, spinning around like a broken Beyblade and chopping right through the extra guards. The sword is incredibly impressed and completely overhypes Kiska, sucking up to him like he's Megamind in this life. Kiska secretly thinks to himself that this is literally only his second time ever using this technique, so he's lucky his arms didn't fly off. Now that all the Undermen are defeated, the Knight Rider is the only one left. The giant boss charges and points his pole right at Kiska, who barely blocks it. This boss can cover a massive area with his long weapon, meaning defeating him is going to be a total nightmare. Kiska yells at the sword to use its auto movement to pull him closer to the enemy, but the boss easily mogs Kiska and blocks every single strike. At this rate, our protagonist is going to take a massive L and get sent straight back to the starting room. Kiska charges again but can't land a single hit. Desperate, Kiska tells the sword they need to risk it and use their secret overpowered technique. The sword gets super worried, warning him that he will literally die if he uses it. But Kiska, acting like a cool and nonchalant goat, replies that he has absolutely no problem with dying. Bro has already died a million times in this dungeon, so what's one more? Kiska leaps high into the air with his blade ready, aiming to slice right through the enemy along with the enemy's spear. He triggers the Great Wheel Slash, cleanly dividing the boss in half until he falls right off his horse. Kiska has actually won. The screen flashes, giving him a mountain of points for killing the boss. The greatsword glazes Kiska even harder, totally sucking up to him, and asks if Kiska is finally going to level it up now. Kiska happily agrees since he just gained 1320 SP, deciding he'll use 700 points to upgrade the blade. The sword suddenly lights up, but instead of turning into a cooler sword, it expands and transforms into a fat, gross blob with sharp teeth. The greatsword is now a ruthless predator, as tall as Kiska himself. Our protagonist is completely shocked by this ugly new form, while the blob cheers that it finally achieved the body it always wanted. Kiska asks what the heck he's supposed to do with it now since it's not even a sword anymore. In response, the blob just opens its giant mouth and swallows Kiska whole. Our boy came all this way just to get backstabbed by his own weapon. A total real bro moment. The blob thanks Kiska for the meal and eats him, sending our protagonist right back to the beginning of the level once more. Bro seriously needs to pull himself together. Kiska sits on the cold floor with his hands on his head, completely depressed that his only companion just betrayed him. He tries to think of a backup plan, wondering if he should just stop using the sword entirely. Maybe he can win with his basic swordsmanship skills alone, or maybe he can just pick up a normal sword from one of the golden armor guards. But he knows none of that will work, because his noodle arms absolutely need the autonomous auto-fighting function of the parasitic blade. Kiska realizes he will just have to outsmart the great sword in the next run. He still can't believe the weapon would betray him like that after everything they went through. The sword clearly has zero respect for the bro code. The Kiska thinks hard and sets up a plan. He runs the loop again, meets the sword, fights the golden guards, and defeats the giant boss all over again. Suddenly, he's back in the exact moment where he made the mistake of leveling the sword up. This time our protagonist refuses to fall for the sword's dirty tricks and fake praises. When the sword asks Kiska to level him up, Kiska just gives it a cold look and tells the blade that he is absolutely not doing that, adding that he already knows about its secret plan to eat him. This completely pisses the sword off. Kiska successfully big-brained the weapon, and the sword snarls that our boy knows way too much. Kiska looks over at the defeated guards, thinking he can just pick up a random sword from the floor and abandon this trash weapon forever. But suddenly, the great sword flies up and holds itself right at Kiska's throat, mocking him and laughing that he's not nearly as smart as he thinks he is. Kiska is completely bamboozled. His brain cells short-circuited because he totally forgot the weapon can move on its own even without being leveled up. The sword mocks him harder, asking if Kiska wants to die right now by getting his throat slit or if he prefers to be eaten by the predator form later on, telling him the choice is his. Kiska shakes with pure fear, his brain running on emergency mode, as he asks if the sword is open for a negotiation. The sword tries to make a deal, saying it would be much wiser for Kiska to choose to be eaten later so the sword can at least level up its stats. Kiska asks if it is absolutely mandatory for him to be the one eaten, suggesting he can just find someone else for the great sword to feed on. The sword explains that only a human with a massive, unyielding will can help it achieve its goal of becoming human. Kiska immediately promises the sword that he knows people with those exact traits, secretly thinking of his high-level psycho friends, Judith and Aja, ready to throw them under the bus to save his own skin. The great sword presses against his neck and barks at Kiska to hurry the hell up and name the poor sucker he's going to feed it. Our hero stands there sweating bullets, racking his brain between Aja and Judith. Honestly, Aja seems like the absolute perfect candidate for a monster snack. Our boy has zero good memories with her, and she has been a massive pain in his butt, deleting his life bar more times than he can even count. He figures he can just hike over, smash the magical barriers protecting her capsule, and weaken her just enough for the sword to chew her up. The math seems easy, but then his guilt kicks in, because Aja is technically the legendary hero of the world who saved humanity a bunch of times. Sure, she gave him a terrible time, but she did it all for her world, and the planet probably needs her alive. So Kiska turns his single-functioning brain cell toward Judith. But before he can even try to rationalize it, he slaps himself and decides he cannot treat Judith like monster food. He absolutely cannot sacrifice her because he is completely in love with her. Their relationship might have officially ended in this current timeline, but our protagonist just can't discard his feelings like trash. He's just a soft boy at heart after all. Though let's be real, Judith is a literal vampire who casually massacres ordinary people, which is definitely not very demure or mindful of her. Kiska thinks harder, realizing his choices are a psycho hero or a blood-sucking vampire. He paces through the dark, twisty corridors until he finally reaches the room where Aja is kept sealed inside her glass capsule. Our boy closes his eyes and takes a deep breath, deciding he is going to throw Aja to the wolves and sacrifice her. But the sword speaks up, grumbling that it can't eat her with all those heavy magical barriers protecting the tube. Kiska tells the weapon that breaking them is no biggie for a guy who can reset time. He stares hard at the capsule, realizing his own life has meant absolutely nothing ever since he unlocked his time travel cheat skill. But what about someone else's life? Is he really about to throw a whole human being away with zero remorse? Right then, Kiska has a complete emotional breakdown. The sword gets instantly annoyed and tells him to hurry up with his pathetic sulking, because Aja might just break out and kill him in the future anyway, meaning he needs to end her right now, but our boy just can't do it. He falls flat onto his knees and vomits right on the floor. He starts having dramatic flashbacks of Aja looking at him and telling him she loves him. The girl was a true Rizzler, and Kiska apparently can't bring himself to murder a chick who has feelings for him. Getting completely overwhelmed by his deep feels, Kiska literally sobs and begs the great sword to just chop his own head off instead, because he simply cannot kill Aja. The sword lets out a massive exhausted sigh, completely done with our protagonist's drama. It tells him that it won't eat Aja after all, since Kiska is being all mushy and pathetic about her, adding that watching Kiska get this emotional actually makes it feel a little more human itself. Kiska snaps out of his crying fit, totally surprised, and thanks the sword from the bottom of his heart, promising that he will find a peaceful way to make the weapon human without any murder. They walk into a new room and Kiska decides it's time to take a rest and plan their next move. He holds some seriously mixed feelings about this place because Aja literally took her own life in this exact room in a past loop, and Judith used to crash here too. But since the vampire queen doesn't live here anymore in this timeline, he figures he can rest safe. Kiska plops his tired butt onto the couch and places the living sword onto the coffee table. He asks the blade if there is really no other way for it to become a human, noting that eating a real person is a bit too much for his weak stomach, and suggests maybe it can achieve its dream by parasitizing some random dungeon monster instead. The sword scoffs, explaining that it has known its entire life that eating a high-will human is the only way to fulfill its wish. It reveals that all its previous masters were complete and utter idiots who couldn't level up its stats and died early like total noobs. Relying on those losers was completely unreliable, so it started to parasitize them out of spite. But even after doing that, all it could do was grow larger in size. It admits that absolutely no one has ever been able to handle its power properly except Kiska, which is the exact reason why the sword kept him alive instead of digesting him immediately. The weapon then asks why the heck Kiska even came to the Katarov dungeon in the first place. Our hero decides to fully trust the blade, and the two of them sit down for a whole dramatic heart-to-heart conversation. Kiska vents about how he's been through absolute hell, how his crops got ruined, how his girl got murdered, and how literally nobody in his village trusts his silver-haired self anymore. Hearing the sob story, the sword smirks and offers to just march into his hometown and eat every single villager for him. Kiska's eyes light up as he realizes the sword's hunger and his own thirst for revenge perfectly align like a match made in heaven. Our protagonist is incredibly happy to hear this, and they promise that starting tomorrow, they will officially escape this dungeon together. With the sheer power of toxic bromance, the duo hypes each other up, easily defeats every single monster in their path, and successfully reaches the final exit door. Victory is basically theirs, but right before they can step out into the sunlight, they freeze solid. Standing right in front of the exit is Judith. She narrows her eyes, noting that her favorite parasitic sword had gone missing from its room, and she had been wondering who stole it. She blocks the door completely, glaring at our boy, and demands to know what the hell Kiska thinks he is up to. Judith stands dead in front of Kiska, coolly scratching her arms before pulling out her giant scythes. She declares that anyone stupid enough to mess with that parasitic sword cannot be allowed to leave this room alive. Kiska instantly thinks he's completely messed up. After suffering and dying for so long, now his prize reward is having to fight the absolute love of his life. The living weapon panics, whispering to Kiska that it can sense massive danger radiating from Judith and that she is way too powerful. Our boy quickly cooks up a desperate plan and drops into a deep bow right in front of the vampire queen. The sword gets annoyed, telling him to stop being a wimp and fight her since they can totally take her down together. But Kiska snaps at the weapon to shut its trap. He politely begs Judith to please just let them walk out of there. Surprisingly, Judith admits she likes his manners, because honestly, who doesn't love a respectful, humble king after all? Still, Judith refuses to let him leave, insisting that the parasite sword is just too dangerous for the outside world. Kiska tries to smooth-talk her, confidently convincing her that he actually has the blade under full control. Judith is genuinely shocked since no one in 1,000 years has ever been able to tame that parasitic freak, making our protagonist look like an absolute Chad. Judith actually believes his story. Ironically, she was the exact person who taught him how to tame the blade in past timelines, but her brain cells have no memory of it in this run. Judith decides to let Kiska pass just because he's such a well-mannered boy, but as our hero walks past her, the stupid sword ruins the vibe by calling her nasty things, muttering that she has a garbage personality and is way too arrogant. This completely pisses Judith off. The sword has some seriously trash manners, so she prepares her scythes and charges right at Kiska with pure anger. Kiska doesn't even try to fight, he just bolts, running away until he can lean against a safe wall to catch his breath. The sword looks at him confused, asking why the heck they didn't just fight her since she's really not all that powerful. Kiska groans, saying he's just happy she let them slip by because he has absolutely zero desire to swing a blade at her. The sword gets super nosy, demanding to know why he's being so soft. Kiska racks his brain for a fake answer because he obviously can't tell the weapon that in another timeline, Judith helped him grow as a person and slept in his bed. The sword smirks, teasing that maybe he's just secretly into dominant girls like her, sounding a little bit jealous. It really thinks it can girl boss, gatekeep, and gaslight him away from other women. Our hero starts walking again, focusing on their main goal. Together, they are going to defeat the final boss of this dungeon. They finally reach a brand new area that the sword admits it has never seen before. Right in the middle of the room sits a lonely treasure chest. Kiska struts up to it, telling his blade that this magical chest can grant him a random new power-up. Kiska pops the lid open and the Crystal of Wisdom slaps him with a new D-rank skill called Appraisal. Wanting to see what's under the hood, he tries using it on his greatsword, but a prompt tells him his level is way too low. Kiska remembers he has a fat stack of unused SP sitting around. He saves exactly 700 points to level up the greatsword later and dumps the rest into his new skill. Once Appraisal hits level 3, he casts it on the weapon again. A holographic screen pops up, but it only tells him stuff he already knows, making him realize this skill is currently about as useful as a solar-powered flashlight in a dark cave. The sword asks what he's blabbering about over there, So Kiska sighs, explaining that he used his new power but it didn't reveal anything new. The sword bursts out laughing, teasing him, and calling him a total pervert for trying to peep on a beautiful girl's stats. Kiska completely freezes in his tracks. The living sword he's been using this whole time is actually a girl? The sword giggles, telling him that she will gladly show him how beautiful she really is one day in the future. Our boy is left scratching his head, wondering what kind of wild person she would actually turn into. Finally, he walks up and stands right in front of the giant boss door. The sword asks if his knees are shaking and if he's nervous, casually making fun of him before cheering him on. Kiska chuckles, thinking this weapon is an absolute oddball, but he genuinely thanks her anyway, admitting that without her auto-fight help, his weak self would have never been able to make it this deep into the dungeon. The sword snorts, telling him to save all that cheesy, sappy talk for later because they have a massive dungeon boss to destroy first. Kiska nods, looking through the door where the final boss waits, a god-tier SS-ranked giant centipede. Kiska readies his living sword once again, quickly activating his new appraisal skill to scan for any weaknesses on the giant centipede. The screen warns him that the monster can spray deadly venom from miles away, meaning a single drop of that toxic juice would instantly mean game over for Kiska. Right on cue, the centipede spits a massive glob of acid, and Kiska barely matrix dodges the poison, using the greatsword's built-in jump boost to fly out of the danger zone. Spying what looks like a tiny opening, our protagonist charges forward full speed, but the centipede's armored skin is way too tough, and Kiska's blade just bounces off like a plastic fork hitting a brick wall. The monster casually swats him away, sending him flying. Kiska rolls backward and tries attacking again, but the centipede slaps him hard with its massive tail, and our boy almost gets squashed flat like a cockroach on a busy sidewalk. The sword panics, asking if Kiska is even okay after taking that hit, and he groans back that he's barely holding on. Desperate to do some actual damage, Kiska tries triggering their secret overpowered technique again, praying to the gaming gods that it finally hurts the giant bug. It does not. He simply bounces off its shell all over again. Kiska is completely shook, realizing this stupid centipede is totally immune to his physical attacks. The sword screams at him to back away right now and plan a proper strategy instead of just mindlessly swinging. Kiska frantically tries slashing at different body parts, but absolutely nothing works, making him think his only option left is to go directly for the monster's eyes. But before he can even aim, the centipede snaps him up, grabs Kiska right in its terrifying mouth and tosses him around like a rag doll. Plonking hard onto the cold ground, our boy just sits there and completely admits defeat. He decides he's totally ready to just die right here, reset time, and come back when he's actually leveled up his stats, thinking that death means absolutely nothing to him since time will just rewind anyway and he's stuck in a permanent loop. The centipede charges to finish him off, but the great sword activates its auto-move functions on its own and forcefully drags Kiska out of the way, saving his lazy butt from dying. The weapon barks at him, asking why the heck he suddenly turned into such a pathetic sore loser, reminding him that she can't ever become a real human without his help, so why the hell is he giving up now? Suddenly, Kiska sees the light at the end of the tunnel. He remembers he only made it this far because of the greatsword's carry, and he can't just quit like a coward. He realizes that while his own body will stay the exact same every time he dies, this specific talking sword will be completely different or forget him in a new lifetime, meaning the promise he made to make her human can only be fulfilled in this exact run. Kiska completely locks in, apologizing out loud for his garbage loser mentality, and decides it is finally time to get serious. He sprints forward, jabbing the centipede all over its body to find a hidden soft spot, but he fails every single time. Suddenly, the giant bug looms over him and opens its massive jaws to swallow Kiska whole. Our protagonist's eyes light up as he realizes this is it. The inside of the mouth is the only weak point on the entire monster. Kiska asks the sword if she is ready to die with him if this plan fails, and since both of them are total unhinged knuckleheads, she happily agrees. Our boy activates his favorite loudmouth skill, Taunt, one last time, making the centipede lose its mind and rush straight at him with its mouth wide open. Kiska dives headfirst straight into the beast's throat and unleashes his swift dragon thrust, cleanly slicing right through the belly of the giant monster from the inside out. The giant centipede explodes, and Kiska stands there victorious as a massive holographic screen pops up in the air, handing him his ultimate completion rewards. The great sword goes wild, celebrating their big win. Our protagonist fought and died a million times, but he never gave up, and at long last, our boy has officially conquered the S-rank Katarov dungeon. Our boy kicks off this scene locked in chains and crawling on the floor like a total scrub. He got framed for murder and tossed into the dirt of this dungeon. Since then, Kiska fought a non-stop deathmatch against massive beasts while the bozo guards watched. Fast forward through the trauma, and our protagonist stands tall, sweating buckets but flexing his win. He straight up conquered the Katarov dungeon and beat the giant centipede. A blinding light drops from the ceiling, granting him a golden weapon as a boss reward. Kiska spots the glowing treasure on the floor and realizes the game drops sweet loot. He bends down to snatch the blazing sword, looking hyped as hell to catch a break. The black parasitic sword catches him, looking at the new blade, and gets jealous fast. The giant eyeball glares at him, accusing Kiska of cheating on it with a hotter weapon. Kiska drops a nervous sweat, holding both tools like a guy caught texting two girls. He tries to smooth-talk the puppet sword, promising it is just a little side action. But the second he grips the flaming blazing sword, he gets hypnotized by the heat. The puppet sword sheds actual tears, making Kiska feel like an absolute jerk. He gives his toxic partner a pity smile and thanks it for the carry. He figures keeping the flaming blade is a massive brain move to avoid the parasite going rogue. Our boy straps the fire sword to his waist, keeping his clingy X-weapon as a backup plan. Kiska steps up to a glowing magic circle. He stares at the magic ring and asks his needy blade if this thing is an actual exit ticket. The sword confirms it, and our protagonist braces himself for the ride. The eyeball weapon stares wide open while Kiska drops a nervous sweat. Taking a deep breath, he steps right into the center of the magic circle. The memories of his painful, miserable days in the Katarov dungeon flash through his brain. He declares it is time to pack it up and say his goodbyes to this absolute hellhole. A massive beam of light beams him up and teleports him out of the grime. Kiska opens his eyes wide, stunned by the fresh air hitting his face. The scene shifts from dark cave walls to giant stone pillars and lush green trees. He stands on a massive balcony overlooking a bright, sunny landscape. Staring out over the rooftops, our boy turns his back to the camera and takes it all in. A close-up shows his jaw hitting the floor, pure joy plastered across his face. The guy looks like a simp who touched grass for the very first time. His depression era is cancelled right now. A beautiful town spreads out below him, complete with church towers and mountains in the back. Kiska stands frozen on the stone steps, gripping his dark blade while the wind blows past him. He stares up at the bright cloudy sky, soaking in the sweet taste of freedom. Down below the massive stairs, a couple of armored guards spot him chilling on the ledge. The two bozos look shook, sweating and stammering as they point at our boy. Kiska looks down at them with a deadpan stare, unbothered by their panic. One guard loses his mind and screams at the top of his lungs. He alerts the whole block that some madman cleared the entire dungeon and returned alive. Kiska walks down the giant stone steps holding his creepy black blade. The parasitic sword speaks up, asking the boss how it feels to finally touch grass and return to the surface. Our boy looks up at the bright clouds, acting super moved by the view. He mutters that the sky looks way too beautiful right now. Stepping toward the heavy iron gates guarded by two tin can soldiers, he admits that even the sky over this toxic Katarov village looks gorgeous. The sword agrees, soaking in the fresh air with him. Moving into the main village square, Kiska stares at the crowded streets. He gets super soft for a second, thinking he might actually forgive these haters for ruining his life. The local bozos spot him, sweating and whispering that there is no way he survived the dungeon. One curly-haired guy points him out, shook to see Kiska breathing. The parasitic sword gives Kiska the ultimate silent side-eye, judging his weak mindset. Kiska remembers his dark past, thinking about how he almost puked from guilt when he tried to sacrifice Ajiha. Just deep inside his head, dark shadowy figures swarm his thoughts. He questions if he is just a soft coward who cannot bring himself to kill anybody. Snapping back to reality, he looks downcast and depressed in front of the village gates. The sword calls him out, asking straight up if he's giving up on his sweet revenge tour. Sudden change of plans, Kiska's entire face shifts. He flashes the most unhinged psychotic smile known to mankind and whispers that he is not giving up at all. The parasitic sword loses its mind, laughing like an absolute maniac because that toxic energy is exactly what it wanted. A glowing screen pops up, announcing the sword leveled up to level 3 and unlocked the brutal predator form. Kiska stares at the floating box with pure crazy eyes while the villagers start panicking, asking what the hell is happening. The sword morphs right away, expanding into a massive, disgusting black blob monster with giant teeth. Kiska calls out the new form, fully embracing his villain era. Kiska commands his pet monster to go wild and devour every single villager in sight. He screams at the blob to leave 0 survivors, looking like an absolute menace. The giant mouth monster cheers and charges straight into the crowd, ready to feast. It catches a screaming dude and crushes him in its shadowy tentacles. Watching the carnage unfold, a spiky-haired bully and his curly-haired friend freak out and try to book it the other way. Before those cowards can escape, Kiska intercepts them in the alleyway. He kicks them hard and whips out his glowing, blazing sword, knocking the bullies flat on their backs. Standing over them with a creepy, dominant smile, Kiska warmly welcomes them back after a long time no see. The guys are shaking on the cobblestones, asking why the hell he is even here. Kiska leans in with a flushed, terrifying grin and demands to know exactly where Darga is hiding. The spiky-haired idiot tries to act tough, refusing to snitch on his boss. Kiska shoves the burning hot tip of his new fire blade right next to the guy's face. Without a second thought, our boy kicks the bully square in the jaw, making him scream in pure agony. Kiska admires his glowing weapon, bragging about how the flames burn whoever he touches. He calls it the absolute perfect tool for a little hardcore torture session. The bully rolls on the ground, holding his burnt face while Kiska watches with 0 empathy. Kiska tells the crying guys that it is fine if they want to keep their mouths shut. He flashes a dead-eyed, flushed smile that screams pure danger. While the bully begs and cries for mercy, Kiska promises he will just keep burning their faces over and over until they finally spill the truth. Our boy is officially cooking. and his thirst for revenge is way hotter than his blade. Kiska tells his giant blob sword he has some personal errands to run, giving the monster full permission to go wild. The puppet sword happily agrees, and the streets quickly fill with screaming people running for their lives. Moving through the chaos, our boy spots the big guy Darga and his crew trying to escape. Kiska blocks their path with a completely unhinged smile, greeting his old bully while Darga just stares back, caught completely lacking. Darga stammers, asking why Kiska is even here. The nervous goons yell that they are way too busy dealing with the monster invasion to waste time on him. Kiska hits them with a crazy smirk and asks what they would do if he was the actual guy causing the monster attacks. Darga gets instantly mad, calling our boy a bastard, but his tough guy act ends fast. Without a single warning, Kiska drives his burning sword straight through Darga's arm. Flames and blood burst from the deep wound while Darga screams in pure agony. Holding his bleeding arm, Darga cries out and orders the rest of his crew to kill the silver-haired freak. Kiska just laughs, bragging that he used to be helpless against them back in the day. He drops a quick taunt, telling the weaklings to come get a taste of his new heat. The goons rush in, but Kiska completely wipes out the entire squad. He cleanly chops one guy's head clean off and stabs another straight through the chest without breaking a sweat. Bodies drop everywhere as our boy flexes his dungeon survival skills, showing these small-town clowns what real trauma looks like. Tossing a severed head to the dirt, Kiska walks back over to his main target. Darga is now shaking on his knees, crying like a total baby. Gaffar's Darga if he knows exactly what kept him motivated down in that dark hellhole. He leans in close with a psycho stare, listing off all his spicy revenge fantasies like burning, carving, and gouging eyes out. Darga completely breaks down, slamming his head into the stones and begging for forgiveness. Kiska smiles softly, telling his absolute favorite victim not to worry too much. Getting right in Darga's face, our boy promises he won't give him an easy death, vowing to end his life in the absolute worst way possible. Meanwhile, outside the buildings, the village streets turn into total chaos. The monster sword is acting like a giant shadow blob chasing random people down the road. It whips out its thick black tentacles and grabs a crying man around the waist while his friends run away screaming. The blob monster shoves the struggling man straight into its massive mouth, biting down hard while blood splatters everywhere. Sitting on the street, the monster licks its lips and casually burps, finding the meal completely delicious. Hound the Adventurers Guild, the locals are panicking outside and begging the fighters to kill the beast. Inside, the sweaty village chief Rigret is losing his mind, yelling at his guards because they are too weak to fight. Right then, Darga bursts through the wooden doors holding his bleeding arm, completely out of breath and falling to his knees. The armored fighters stare in shock, but the mood changes completely when Kiska walks through the open doorway holding his blade. Kiska flashes a wild smile, looking down at his old bullies and announcing he has been searching for the chief. Bleeding on the floor, Darga begs his dad to just kill Kiska already. The confused chief asks who this guy even is. Right before Kiska proudly explains his story. He brags that he actually survived the dungeon and just teamed up with the monsters to terrify the town. Regret's eyes widen in shock as he finally realizes this dangerous kid is the exact boy he kicked out. Kiska stands in the center of the room, staring them dead in the eyes, reminding them how they blamed him for Namia's murder. Pointing his blade directly at the floor, Kiska smiles like a total crazy person and exposes Darga for being the real killer all along. He calls out the chief for covering up his own son's dirty work, completely embarrassing the old man in front of his entire squad. Furious at getting caught red-handed, Regret orders his armored guards to grab the boy immediately, ignoring the truth. Darga laughs from the ground, mocking Kiska that surviving the dungeon means nothing up here. The armored fighters completely surround Kiska, getting way too confident because they have more people. They point their iron swords at him, laughing that there is zero chance he survives taking on the whole squad at once. Kiska just drops his head and hits them with a dark smile, sarcastically agreeing that he cannot win this fight. Before the guards can even blink, Kiska launches forward and sends the first guard flying through the air, slicing clean through the next man's chest armor. Kiska promises to test their tough talk as the bodies hit the floor. Inside the guild, Kiska ducks a messy sword swing while the village chief and his son watch in total shock. Kiska effortlessly beats the guard, slicing straight through his armor with a flaming blade. The guard's head goes flying into the air with a massive spray of blood, but Kiska just sighs about how weak these guys are. His mind flashes back to the absolute nightmare bosses he fought down in the dungeon. Compared to those giant monsters, fighting these regular humans is literally a joke. He moves like lightning through the room, chopping down 3 more men in the blink of an eye. Another guard drops dead, and Kiska casually complains that this fight is just way too easy. Regret and Darga are stuck sitting at their table, completely surrounded by dead bodies and sweating heavily. The village chief tries to run for the door, but Kiska instantly points his burning sword at his back. He warns the man that taking one more step means instant death, freezing the entire room in fear. Kiska snaps his head back, glaring at the chief and his son with pure killer intent. He tells them if they even think about running, he will chop their heads off right now. Then his face completely changes into a bright, innocent smile that feels incredibly dangerous. He asks if they want to play a special little game since the father and son are finally back together. Darga and his dad are completely clueless, shaking and asking what kind of game he means. Kiska drops the act, looking down with a wild smile as he prepares to make them suffer. He casually announces that one of them is going to get brutally tortured today. Gripping his blazing sword, he flashes a twisted grin and tells them they get to choose who takes the pain. He offers the father and son a chance to talk it over and pick the victim. When the two men just sit there stunned, Kiska barks at them to hurry up. He tells them to be grateful he's even giving them a choice. Yigakar panics, turns to his son, and immediately throws Darga straight under the bus. The chief claims he has important village duties, so Darga must take the torture since he killed Namia anyway. Darga completely loses his mind, screaming at his dad for framing Kiska in the first place. Rigrit actually grabs Darga by the shirt, yelling that he only hid the crime for his son's sake, demanding Darga take the hit. Kiska sits comfortably in a chair, laughing at this absolute circus of a family. He looks at them with pure disgust, calling them totally pathetic for turning on each other so fast. Kiska honestly hoped they would show some family love and beg to take the pain for each other. Standing up, he sighs that he expected way too much from these losers, and declares time is up. Darga and Rigrit freeze in terror as Kiska drops the final bad news on their heads. Flashing his most crazy smile yet, he announces they both get to be tortured. Hearing that, the chief completely breaks down and dives straight onto the floor to save his own skin. Rigrit violently slams his head into the tiles, begging for a desperate apology for his son's actions. Kiska watches in pure shock as the old man hits rock bottom. The chief literally begs Kiska to do whatever he wants to Darga, completely selling his boy out just to save himself. Kiska sits back down, staring at the old man groveling on the floor. He calls sacrificing your own kid the most disgusting sight in the entire world. Darga screams at his dad, calling him a piece of trash for the ultimate betrayal. Kiska just smiles warmly at the pathetic duo, calling them a perfect match before announcing he has finally made his decision. Right in the middle of the blood-stained guild, Kiska looks down at the sweating men and pretends to accept the chief's request. Darga completely loses his mind, realizing his own dad just threw him straight into danger. In a massive twist of pure cowardice, Darga slams his face into the floor and begs Kiska to torture his father instead. Kiska just hits them with a cold stare, whispering that their apologies are way too late. Both the father and son are groveling on the tiles, squeaking like rats caught in a trap. Kiska flashes a bright smile, mocking their pathetic display by claiming he is moved by their deep family bond. He tells the two losers to raise their heads while tossing a couple of basic iron swords right onto the floor. He sets a trap, ordering the father and son to pick up the blades and fight each other to the death. To make it interesting, Kiska promises the winner will skip the torture entirely and walk away with a special prize. Without wasting a single second, the chief and Darga start swinging at each other like wild animals. Darga lands a nasty stab right into his dad's arm, proving these guys have absolutely zero loyalty when their own lives are on the line. Kiska casually sits back in a wooden chair, enjoying the front row seat to this messy family fight. He smiles warmly, glad that these two are such terrible people, watching a father and son try to murder each other to survive. Darga completely loses it, driving his blade straight through the chief's neck in a brutal, bloody finish. The village chief chokes and drops dead while Darga stands there panting, completely dripping in his own dad's blood. Kiska claps his hands together like a proud teacher, congratulating the bully and promising to cancel his torture appointment. Darga lets out a huge sigh of relief, breaking into a sweaty smile as he asks if he is finally forgiven. But Kiska instantly hits him with a total plot twist, pulling out his blazing sword for the real prize. Kiska announces that Darga's true reward for winning the family deathmatch is a one-on-one duel with him. Darga completely freezes up, crying that he has zero chance of winning before desperately trying to apologize again. Kiska drops his fake smile, looking dead inside as he lists off a lifetime of trauma and daily beatdowns just because of his silver hair. The mood gets completely dark when Kiska brings up his murdered girlfriend, Namia, blaming Darga for taking away his absolute favorite person. Darga cries ugly tears, blaming the heat of the moment, but Kiska just smiles, admitting he was actually excited to see Darga fight today. With zero hesitation left, Kiska swings his burning blade and slices Darga wide open, screaming that he finally gets to finish the trash himself. Yui, Kiska swings his burning blade and rips a brutal cut right through Darga. Thick blood explodes directly out of the man's body. Kiska does not hold back a single drop of his deep hate. Darga gets completely split wide open in a savage strike. Kiska stares down with the coldest, most dead eyes. He watches the trash get taken out as Darga's ruined body hits the stone floor, completely chopped in half. Blood sprays across the room like a horror movie scene. Trishing focus back to the whole room, Kiska stands alone, surrounded by the defeated guild members. A glowing, sweet vision of his dead girlfriend Namia flashes in his mind with a bright smile. Kiska actually sheds a single tear for his lost girl. He whispers softly that his revenge is finally over and he has properly avenged her. Suddenly, a massive, deafening roar completely shakes the wooden walls of the guild building. Kiska snaps out of his deep feelings and gets instantly shocked by the crazy noise. He calls out for his puppet sword and runs straight out the double doors. Stepping out into the village street, Kiska stops dead in his tracks and lets out a confused gasp. Looking down the road, there is no giant monster causing a panic anymore. Instead, a ridiculously massive, smooth black egg is just sitting right in the middle of the street. Kiska stares at this giant, weird object, completely lost for words. Sweating hard, Kiska asks the puppet sword if it is seriously playing a joke on him right now. Stepping closer to the giant egg, Kiska asks what he is even looking at. Suddenly loud cracking noises echo through the street as deep cracks spread all over the black shell. Kiska gets shocked and braces himself as the giant egg completely shatters. A massive explosion of messy, clear liquid blasts everywhere, washing over the entire street. Kiska throws his arms up to block the splash, grunting as the slime covers the ground. Looking at the sticky mess, Kiska is super confused and asks if this is just egg white. The steam clears and he spots a completely naked girl with long hair forming right in the middle of the puddle. She is sitting on her knees, completely exposed in all that sticky white slime. Kiska stares wide-eyed at her body, dropping a massive sweat drop as he realizes who this actually is. He stammers out, calling her the puppet sword, totally shocked by her new human form. Total Kiska breaks into a huge smile, happy that his weapon actually achieved her dream. He happily tells her she finally became a real human after all their hard work. The naked girl looks at her own bare hands and lets out a massive sigh of relief, thanking goodness it actually worked. But a second later, she looks down at her body and her face completely drops. She stutters in pure confusion, realizing something is totally wrong with her new body. The half of her beautiful face is covered in gross, crusty monster skin, with a creepy yellow eye staring blankly. A disgusting, fleshy monster arm with sharp spikes and another giant eyeball is growing right out of her shoulder. She looks completely horrified, her normal eye wide with pure terror at her own reflection. Kiska stands there frozen, his pupils shrinking as he stares at the completely ruined transformation. The girl completely loses it, screaming no over and over while grabbing her head in pure panic. She cries that she just wanted to be a normal human, absolutely devastated that she looks like a total freak. Tears stream down her messed up face as she begs Kiska to kill her right then and there. Kiska yells back at her to stop saying such stupid things, refusing to kill her. He calls out her name, completely desperate to calm his weapon down before she totally loses her mind. Tall, standing in the street, Kiska looks at the half-monster girl and tries to comfort her. He shouts that she is his partner and he does not care about her scary looks. The girl cries out her good eye, begging to know if he can love a freak like her. Kiska smiles bright and screams that he can love her, making her cry happy tears. The sword girl sobs with a huge smile, thanking her master for being a true friend. Right when things get sweet, a creepy little black blob pops up out of nowhere. Kiska freezes as massive, wet black tentacles drop straight down from the sky. Sitting in that sticky puddle, the girl hits him with a heartbreaking look. She smiles sadly and tells him that he is a liar. Tuck. Kiska is completely stunned as his eyes bulge right out of his skull. The nasty black blob covers her body, swallowing her up in thick, dark slime. He screams for his puppet sword in pure panic, while the tentacles drag her deep into the darkness. The massive blob explodes and thrashes across the street, while Kiska yells his lungs out. The scene shifts away from the madness to a quiet, peaceful view of the village rooftops. The scene shifts to a bright, quiet graveyard sitting high up on a beautiful cliff. Kiska drops down on one knee right in front of a heavy stone grave, feeling incredibly sad. He smiles softly at the headstone, whispering to Namiya that he finished her revenge tour. He admits she was the only decent person in that entire awful village. He looks down at the dirt and confesses that she was his entire world. Kiska keeps pouring his heart out, talking about how he risked his whole life escaping that terrible dungeon. He admits he died an embarrassing amount of times trying to break out. He smiles, talking about the weird new bestie he picked up in the dark. A quick memory shows the ugly one-eyed weapon floating next to him, while Kiska explains her dream to become human. He tells the grave that this crazy sword is the exact reason he survived to get revenge. Kiska is feeling awful, crying at Namiya's grave while thinking about how he completely messed up. He remembers how his weapon finally got a human body, but the whole transformation crashed and burned instantly. Kiska stares at the heavy tombstone, crying hard onto his dirty boots. He feels like the world has totally turned its back on him, and that nobody is left standing by his side. He is completely isolated and totally alone. He breaks down, crying his eyes out while asking how he is even supposed to keep living. Just when he hits rock bottom, a sudden memory pops into his head. The crazy girl Ajahir appears in his mind with a sweet smile, reminding him of a special trick she gave him. Kiska stops crying, takes a deep breath, and quickly opens his glowing screen to check his current stats. Staring at the screen, Kiska gets a massive reality check. Every single high-level skill he worked so hard to get is completely wiped out. His strong sword abilities are straight up gone, leaving his stats completely blank and exposed. But he spots the one ultimate power he still has left. The glorious save and reset skill is still shining bright, ready for another timeline change. Lord Kiska instantly wipes his tears and completely changes his mood from sad to serious. He smiles, proudly declaring he did not fight through pure hell just to end up with this garbage ending. Walking away from the lonely grave, he walks straight toward the dangerous edge of the stone balcony. Standing right on the ledge, he promises to redo this whole messy run as many times as it takes. He refuses to settle, planning to force the exact future he actually wants. Standing on the absolute edge, Kiska steps his boots forward like a madman. He drops a wild smile and tells his puppet sword to just wait for him in the next timeline. Promising to fix her broken transformation, Kiska leans back and lets gravity take over. He falls backward off the giant stone cliff, diving headfirst into the dark forest below. Screaming all the way down, Kiska promises to make her human no matter what it takes, officially pulling the ultimate rage quit to restart his life. Dropping back into the dirt once again, Kiska starts attempt number 560 like a determined tryhard. Our boy falls to his hands and knees, breathing hard on the cold stone floor. He just erased his entire timeline and started from zero again. No matter how many times he fails, he refuses to stop. Standing up and brushing the dust off his clothes, our protagonist makes a promise to his missing weapon. He swears he will turn his puppet sword into a real human girl one day. It sounds impossible, but he is serious. As he walks through the dungeon, our hero finally accepts a painful truth. Killing Darga will never bring Namia back, so he gives up on revenge and decides those villagers are no longer worth his time. The only person he wants to save now is the one friend who stayed by his side. He reaches the hidden weapon room, expecting to see his sword resting on its stand. Instead, the glass case is empty. His heart sinks. Looking down the dark hallway, he quietly wonders where it could have gone. Before he can react, a huge black tentacle suddenly shoots out of the darkness and wraps around his waist. Our boy gasps as it drags him deeper into the shadows before he can fight back. The tentacle pulls him in front of a giant monster covered with blinking eyes and sharp spikes. Its huge black mouth opens wide, ready to swallow him. Hanging helplessly, our protagonist calls out the name of his weapon in disbelief. Bro really came here to save his partner and got grabbed in 2 seconds. Staring at the monster, he desperately asks why his puppet sword turned into something so horrible. Memories of all the battles they fought together flash through his mind. She had even started becoming human inside his soul room. But the monster gives no answer and only tightens its grip. Without saying a word, the creature shoves him straight into its mouth. He dies at the hands of the partner he came to save and wakes up once again on the cold stone floor. Falling to his knees, our hero is crushed by the betrayal. Sitting in silence, he slowly understands the truth. His partner has become an uncontrollable monster and can no longer fight beside him. Without her strength, his chances of surviving the dungeon are almost gone. A heavy feeling of despair settles over him. After a long moment, our protagonist forces himself to think. Then he remembers something important. His puppet sword always kept her memories, even after every reset. That means she was never affected by his time loop. He starts wondering if there are others like her. Realizing this mystery could be the key to escaping the loop, he decides to search for answers. With a new plan in mind, our boy walks to a heavy wooden door. There is only one person left who might know the truth. He heads toward the glass tube where Aja has been sealed away. Even now, he is not excited about asking the woman who killed him for help. Stopping in front of the tube, he knows she could wake up and kill him again. Still, he smiles and decides he does not care anymore. He will keep coming back until he learns the truth. He slams his hand against the glass, it shatters instantly, and Aja falls onto the cold floor. She slowly sits up and rubs her head. Looking at him with confusion, she quietly asks who he is. Our protagonist freezes before asking if she really cannot remember him. She apologizes and admits she has no memory of his face. Instead of getting upset, he simply smiles and tells her it is fine. Aja looks at him with confused eyes and asks if he knows who she is. Our hero quickly realizes what happened. The dangerous woman who once hunted him has completely lost her memories. Looking around the room, she asks where they are. He explains that they are inside the Kadyrov dungeon. Since she can still speak and think normally, he asks if she knows anything about his missing puppet sword. She sadly shakes her head and says she cannot remember anything. Our boy explains that the sword is actually a living partner and the closest friend he has. He tells her how she changed into a terrible monster. Then he promises that he will find a way to make her human. Aja smiles brightly and says she wants to help him save his friend. He thanks her, but deep inside he feels uneasy. This kind and gentle girl is nothing like the dangerous killer he remembers. It almost feels like he met a completely different person. Deciding not to question it any longer, our protagonist tells her that a powerful monster is blocking their path and he has no weapon. She nervously admits she does not know what to do. He asks if she remembers how to use her item box ability. After focusing for a moment, a bright light appears in her hand. Seeing the light, our boy excitedly asks her to pull out a weapon. She reaches into the magic space and takes out a large shining sword with a proud smile. He happily grabs it, joking that they finally have something better than his bare fists. Aja admits the sword is far too heavy for her anyway. Soon they reach another battle. Our hero cuts through a group of headless mules with fast, powerful attacks. Aja watches with wide eyes, amazed by his strength. After the fight, they continue down the hallway. She happily suggests cooking the fresh monster meat for dinner, making him wonder if she is taking dungeon life a little too seriously. Although he feels stronger, his thoughts keep returning to the puppet sword. He knows he will need her power to face the golden living armors waiting ahead. Then he remembers someone who might know the truth. Stopping his companion, he says they need to visit one more person. He warns Aja that the person they are about to meet is difficult and likes to stay in control. She nods and promises to stay quiet. Together they walk up to a pair of heavy doors covered with glowing magic circles. Our boy takes a deep breath before stepping inside. The room is calm and elegant. Sitting at a table with a cup of tea is the ancient vampire queen Judith. She looks at the two visitors before her eyes settle on the confused girl. A small smile appears on her face as she calmly calls Ajihai by name, showing that she recognizes the legendary hero immediately. Kokiska and Ajihai kneel before the vampire queen while Judith calmly drinks her tea. Our boy explains that his puppet sword has changed into a terrifying monster. Judith quietly sets down her cup and says the problem sounds familiar. She admits she may know how to fix it. Both visitors stare at her in shock, surprised that she is actually willing to help. Leaning forward, our protagonist eagerly asks if she really knows a way to change the sword back. Judith smiles with quiet confidence and reminds them she has lived for more than 1,000 years. She explains that the puppet sword belongs to the parasitic series, a group of cursed weapons she has seen many times before. As she speaks, Kiska and Aja listen closely, afraid to miss a single word. The vampire queen explains that these weapons give their owners great power, but they often take control in the end. A few strong people manage to master them, but most were consumed by the curse. Looking at our hero, Judith says she already has an idea about his sword. However, she refuses to be certain until she sees the monster herself. Our boy quickly thanks her and drops to one knee beside Aboa, asking for her help. Judith watches the pair in silence before pointing out the real problem. The sword is not what worries her. Instead, she asks why he casually walked into her home with the legendary hero Ajaha. Judith turns her sharp eyes toward the young girl and calls her someone powerful enough to change the world. She wants to know why such a dangerous person is standing in her private lounge. Our protagonist immediately explains that Ajaha has completely lost her memories. While he nervously speaks, the girl simply sits there looking confused. He remembers Judith once telling him how she had spent her long life being hunted. Our boy understands why she finds it difficult to trust powerful strangers. Trying to calm the situation, he smiles and introduces himself as nothing more than a simple farmer. Judith looks genuinely surprised that an ordinary farmer somehow ended up traveling with the world's greatest hero. Our hero calmly explains that he was only trying to survive when fate dragged him into the Katarov dungeon. Looking Judith in the eyes, he promises he is just a normal man doing his best. She studies him for a long moment before admitting she does not fully believe his story. Even so, she respects his determination. With a small smile, Judith agrees to help deal with the mutated sword. Relief spreads across the room. Kiska and Aja thank her, and our boy cannot hide his excitement. Getting help from the vampire queen was much easier than he expected. The three of them officially decide to work together. It is an unusual team, but everyone agrees to face the danger side by side. Our protagonist feels more hopeful now that two powerful fighters are standing with him. Suddenly, Aja grows uneasy and quietly says that something dangerous is coming. Before anyone can react, another black-haired girl drops into the room from above. The newcomer looks exactly like Aja, but her cold smile gives off a completely different feeling. Without warning, she swings a huge sword at the group. Judith steps forward to stop the attack, but the stranger slices through both of the vampire queen's hands. Our boy shouts in shock, wondering how someone could cut through a vampire so easily. The real Aja stares at the stranger in complete confusion and asks why another version of herself exists. The newcomer coldly calls herself Dark Aja and says the gentle girl standing there is only a fake. She knocks the confused Ajaba onto the floor without showing any mercy. Dark Ajaba says the two of them should become one again. The frightened girl refuses, saying she has no idea what she means. Angry at the answer, the clone charges forward to erase her completely. At that moment, Judith calmly regenerates her missing hands into two large blood scythes. She warns the intruder that attacking her home comes with a heavy price. The two powerful women clash, sending a huge shock through the room. Watching the battle, our protagonist finally realizes that Dark Age is a completely separate person from the kind girl beside him. The clone angrily orders Judith to move aside. Instead, our hero steps in front of his companions. He calmly tells Dark Age that he did not come looking for a fight today, but he will protect the people standing behind him. Dark Age House shouts that she is the true hero who saved the world and calls the gentle Aja a fake. Our boy stays completely calm. He tells her that her title means nothing to him. The only thing that matters is the person she has become. Just standing firmly with his sword ready, he tells the clone that she is not welcome with them. He refuses to let her hurt his friends. Bro really chose to argue with the one person crazy enough to attack a vampire. Those words hit Dark Age harder than any sword. Her weapon slips from her hand as she slowly falls to her knees. Tears begin running down her face while she admits that, even after saving the entire world, nobody ever truly loved her. The clone breaks down completely, crying louder with every second. All her pride disappears as years of pain finally come pouring out. Our boy Judith and the real Aja stand in silence, watching the heartbreaking scene. Through her tears, Dark Age says she regrets saving the world, and wishes everything would simply disappear. Raising one empty hand into the air, she speaks a single word: reset. In that instant, she tries to erase the entire timeline and destroy the world itself. Shifting to a sunny afternoon outside the local Adventurers Guild, Kiska sits quietly at a wooden table. Our boy takes a long sip from his mug, looking completely unbothered while chilling in the tavern with his hot meat. He drops a wild truth bomb, casually noting that he is currently hanging out in Katarov village. The absolute madman smirks, revealing that he somehow landed exactly 100 years in the past. Taking another gulp of his drink, Kiska remembers the absolute meltdown that brought him here in the first place. His mind jumps back to Dark Age horror, throwing her massive crying fit and screaming to reset everything. That salty temper tantrum literally swallowed the entire world in a thick wave of pitch-black darkness. Transitioning to an empty dark grid, our boy suddenly wakes up floating aimlessly in a weird void with zero sky or ground. Stranded in this trippy space, Kiska gets surrounded by a bunch of freaky floating silver pyramids. A mysterious voice echoes through the dark, teasing our boy and saying he looks like he just saw a ghost. Kiska sweats hard, admitting his brain is totally scrambled after everything that just went down with his crazy exes. The voice just laughs, thanking our protagonist for putting on such a highly entertaining, scandalous show. Getting totally annoyed by the disrespect, Kiska barks at the voice and demands to know exactly who they are. The floating shapes declare themselves as the ultimate observer of the world, keeping eyes on all the dirty secrets. They drop some heavy lore explaining this dark grid is literally the graveyard of a ruined planet. Kiska connects the dots, realizing Dark Age Haiti managed to rewrite causality and completely delete their entire reality. The observer explains our boy only survived the wipeout because he exists completely outside the normal flow of time. Kiska looks at his hands, wondering how his squishy self is still breathing in a deleted universe. He honestly has zero clue what causality even means. His brain currently running on empty fumes, but he figures his dirty little save and reset trick is the only thing keeping his consciousness alive right now. The floating shapes suddenly interrupt his thoughts to drop a massive, heavy offer onto the table. They ask Kiska straight up if he desperately wants to save Ajeha from her messy, toxic fate. Our boy looks completely shook as the observer claims she is the absolute key to fixing this broken reality. They promise that saving her is the only way to revive the planet and bring everything back to normal. Kiska stares into the void, realizing this whole toxic roller coaster started the exact second he met that girl. He thinks about her weird connection to the dark clone and those salty tears that literally ended the world. Our protagonist admits he still has absolutely no idea who his crazy waifu actually is, deep down, but he completely locks in, ready to risk it all if she is truly the key to bringing his world back. Kiska is chilling at the guild bar in Katarov village, casually sipping a drink like he owns the place. The scene cuts to him revealing he is currently living in the past, a full 100 years before his original timeline. He is just trying to survive while keeping his identity on the down low. Suddenly, the guild staff spots him and starts blowing up his spot, announcing that the platinum-ranked adventurer who cleared the infamous dungeon is sitting right there. Our boy just sighs, knowing his quiet lunch is officially cancelled. A busty blonde knight struts over to his table, looking super annoyed that he did not just step forward immediately. Kiska tries to play it cool, stammering that he was just in a huge hurry to get his food. She is not having any of his weak excuses, grabbing him by the arm and forcefully dragging him across the floor. Our boy looks completely traumatized, wondering why this female knight has such insane grip strength. He gets hauled straight out of the guild hall while the rest of the room watches in total silence. They arrive at the heavy, ominous entrance of the Katarov dungeon, where a whole squad of adventurers is waiting. The blonde knight introduces Kiska as the man who cleared this death trap, hoping to get some free expert advice. A tall blonde woman with a ponytail, Canaria, steps forward to greet the group, checking our boy out with a skeptical look. She is clearly not sold on his vibes, muttering that he looks way too soft and weak to be a real dungeon-clearing legend. Canaria gets right in Kiska's face, asking for his name while her squad looks on with massive doubt. Our boy nervously introduces himself as Kiska, looking like a deer in headlights. The blonde knight stands right behind him, clearly stressed and questioning why they are trusting a random stranger with their lives. Canaria keeps it professional, telling everyone to chill out and stay calm while she handles the situation. Kiska is just standing there, hoping he does not have to fight his way out of another awkward social interaction today. The squad gathers to hash out the details while Canaria keeps it professional. She admits that working with a complete stranger is a huge gamble, but earning his trust is the top priority for their mission. She asks Kiska to keep their upcoming discussion under wraps, and our boy agrees to zip his lips. The group is clearly stressed, but they need someone who knows the dungeon's map inside out to even stand a chance against their target. Canaria drops the bomb, revealing they have been hunting a mysterious person hiding deep in the Katarov dungeon. Kiska is visibly sweating, wondering who they are tracking down while he stays low-key. He plays it cool, admitting he knows the dungeon layout better than anyone, even though his heart is racing. Canaria finally spills the beans, announcing their target is none other than the legendary Demon King himself. Kiska completely loses his mind, looking like he just saw a ghost in broad daylight. Our protagonist stammers out in pure shock, totally unable to compute why this random group is hunting such a god-tier boss. The scene freezes while narration drops the heavy context. This is happening a century before Kiska's time. A legendary hero party once took down the Demon King back in the day, and these warriors are part of that history. Kiska frantically asks who the hell these people are supposed to be. Canaria stands tall, looking like the ultimate main character as she introduces the crew. She reveals the leader is the legendary hero Eligen, flanked by his elite squad of companions. This is the fabled party that supposedly clapped the Demon King and saved the entire planet. Kiska stands there staring at a living legend, fully realizing he just crashed into a history lesson he was never prepared for. Elijin explains that the western region is in the middle of a brutal war against the Demon Lord's army. Their side is winning for now, but everything could change if the Demon Lord escapes into the Katarov dungeon. If that happens, he could hide in the darkness and rebuild his forces. That is why they need someone who knows the dungeon better than anyone else. Canaria steps forward and sincerely asks Kiska to guide them with his knowledge and experience. Our boy quietly looks at the group, trying to understand how he somehow ended up standing with the legendary hero's party. Before agreeing, he asks if he can ask one important question. Elijin smiles and tells him to ask anything. Taking a deep breath, our protagonist mentions the name Age Hatsubaki and asks if anyone has ever met her. The party exchanges confused looks. After a moment, Canaria apologizes and says none of them have ever heard that name. Our hero hides his disappointment behind a small smile, but he quickly realizes this famous party might still help him. Looking back at the group, he offers a deal. He promises to guide them through the dungeon and help defeat the Demon Lord. In return, he asks them to use their influence to help him find a Jiha after the mission. Elijin happily accepts without hesitation. The legendary hero shakes his hand, officially welcoming him into the party. Our boy cannot believe he has just joined the most famous group of heroes in history. Wanting everyone to feel comfortable, Elijin suggests introducing themselves before moving out. Canaria asks their newest member to go first. Kiska scratches the back of his neck and introduces himself as a simple swordsman and adventurer. He also admits his only special skill is taunt, which mostly makes monsters focus on him. The group immediately agrees that he will make a great frontline fighter. Next, Elijin introduces himself as Elijin Rastarna, the current legendary hero. He calmly reveals that he holds a master rank, and is ranked 7th among the strongest people in the world. Our protagonist is stunned. He remembers reading about this very man in history books from 100 years in the future. The group also explains that Elijin is the first prince of the kingdom of Frastarna. Our boy suddenly realizes he is not only standing beside the world's greatest hero, but also a real prince. The blonde receptionist adds that master rank belongs only to the 10 strongest people alive. Hearing that Elijin is ranked 7th, our hero starts wondering how someone that powerful still acts so humble. Now he has to guide a walking legend through the dungeon. Canaria introduces herself next. She is a diamond rank holy knight known for both great defense and powerful attacks. Our protagonist gives an awkward smile, already feeling how serious this mission is. A large bearded dwarf steps forward with a loud laugh and introduces himself as Gorgon, the party's warrior. He happily welcomes Kiska and says he is looking forward to fighting together. Our boy thanks him and says the honor is his. Gorgon laughs again and jokes that every member of the party is a little strange in their own way. Looking around, our protagonist notices a quiet man wearing a dark hood. He politely greets him, but the man Nock stays completely silent. Our boy scratches his head and quietly thinks Gorgon was probably telling the truth. This really is an unusual group. Thinking everyone has finished, he suddenly hears Canaria clear her throat. Smiling, she points toward the smallest member of the party, whom he completely failed to notice. Looking down, our hero finds a tiny elf girl carrying a huge staff. With a friendly smile, he gently pats her head and asks if she got separated from her mother. The little elf instantly turns bright red with anger and glares at him. Elijin cannot help laughing as he introduces the girl as Nayu, the party's powerful elven mage. Our protagonist immediately remembers that elves can live for hundreds of years while looking young. Realizing his mistake, he bows deeply and apologizes while the others laugh at his awkward moment. No crosses her arms and warns him never to treat her like a child again. He quickly agrees, promising to show proper respect from now on. With the introductions finally finished, Canaria announces that it is time to leave. The party soon arrives at the huge entrance of the Katarov dungeon. Stopping before the massive doors, our boy welcomes them to the second entrance. Canaria looks confused and asks what he means. His expression becomes serious as he explains that this entrance is where condemned criminals are thrown into the dungeon. The knights fall silent as they realize the guy they just recruited was once one of those prisoners. After making their final preparations, the party activates the teleportation circle. A bright light surrounds everyone before they are transported deep into the dungeon. When the light fades, our protagonist quickly looks around and realizes he has been separated from the others. The hallway is completely silent. Now he is alone again. Looking around, he quietly admits he never reached this floor during his earlier attempts. Our boy begins walking through the long stone corridor, searching for any sign of the hero's party. The deeper he goes, the stronger the strange feeling becomes. Something powerful is waiting ahead. A huge ape-like monster with a sharp mohawk slowly steps out of the darkness. It towers over him, muscles covered in scars. Our hero calmly grips his sword and gives a small grin, joking that even monsters care about their hairstyles. The beast answers with a deafening roar and charges forward, ready to crush him. Deep inside the dungeon, our protagonist comes face to face with a huge bugbear with a sharp mohawk. Instead of panicking, he smiles a little. He fought this exact monster hundreds of times in previous timelines, so every attack is already burned into his memory. The bugbear throws a powerful punch, but our boy quickly ducks under it. Before the monster can react, he pulls out his flaming sword and cuts it down with one clean strike. The giant creature falls to the ground without getting another chance to attack. Watching the body collapse, a drop of sweat rolls down his face. Out of old habit, he almost fought with his bare hands, just like he did during his countless deaths in the past. Shaking off the memory, he decides to clear the remaining bugbears as fast as possible and catch up with the hero's party. As he runs through the dungeon, he suddenly stops in front of a deadly trap. A huge pit filled with sharp spikes blocks the path. His face grows serious as old memories return. In the past, he used to charge through traps like this without caring, because he knew he would reset after dying. Looking at it now, he realizes the fear never truly left him. This time, our hero chooses the safe path. He carefully moves along the edge until he finally gets past the trap without a scratch. A little farther ahead, he enters a small room where a beautiful treasure chest sits on a stone pedestal. The moment he sees it, he remembers this was the place where he gained his second special skill many years ago. Since history has already changed, he wonders if the chest will still work. Slowly opening the lid, he sees a glowing magic screen appear in front of him. It displays many different abilities, ranked from strongest to weakest. Relief fills his heart. The treasure still functions exactly as before. Now he has to choose wisely. Looking through the list, our protagonist remembers reaching this room in his previous life without a weapon. Back then, he survived only by making monsters fight each other. Things are very different now. He already has a powerful enchanted sword and far better sword skills. Without much hesitation, he chooses the ability of acceleration. He remembers the monsters that killed him again and again during his past journey. This skill will finally let him fight them on equal footing. Wanting to test it immediately, our boy heads straight toward another group of bugbears. Smiling confidently, he quietly says it is time to see what his new skill can really do. The moment acceleration activates, everything changes. Only seconds later, pieces of defeated bugbears cover the floor. Standing among them, our hero stares in disbelief. He quietly wonders if these monsters were always this weak. Looking down at the flaming sword in his hand, he finally understands the truth. It is not only the new skill, the combination of the enchanted weapon, his experience and acceleration has made him far stronger than ever before. Just then, a hidden stone passage slowly opens nearby. A confident smile appears on his face. The monsters in this part of the dungeon are no longer a serious threat. Even so, he reminds himself not to lose focus. His real goal is not clearing monsters. The demon lord is still waiting somewhere ahead. Although finding the hero's party should come first, there is something even more important he needs to confirm. Following another hallway, our protagonist reaches a strange room where 3 giant magic circles glow across the floor. Without hesitation, he steps onto one of them. Bright light surrounds him as the teleport spell activates. Only one thought fills his mind. If his guess is right, he might finally find the person he has been searching for. When the light disappears, he finds himself inside a massive dark chamber that looks like a sky full of stars. At the center stands a huge glowing seal covered with powerful magic. His eyes immediately search the prison. Then he freezes because it is completely empty. Memories of Cha trapped inside those chains flash through his mind. Suddenly, he understands the truth. This point in history happened before she was ever sealed away. If she is not here, then she must still be somewhere else. Determined to find her, our boy leaves the chamber and continues exploring the unfamiliar halls. After walking for a while, he hears the sounds of battle echoing through the dungeon. Quietly moving closer, he looks around the corner. His eyes widen. Canaria is fighting alone inside a werewolf nest. She moves with amazing speed, blocking attacks and cutting through enemies with graceful swordplay. Watching her, our protagonist cannot help feeling impressed. But he also knows this place better than anyone. 1 or 2 werewolves are not dangerous. The real danger begins when the whole pack attacks together. Almost as if proving his thoughts right, another werewolf suddenly jumps toward Canaria from behind. She activates her own acceleration skill to avoid one attack, but another beast rushes toward her blind spot. Without thinking, our hero charges forward. His sword slices through the werewolf before it can touch her. Landing beside the surprised knight, he gives a small smile and says he came to help. Standing back to back, the two prepare for the rest of the pack. Raising his dark enchanted sword, our boy says they will finish every last one of them. Working together, they cut through the werewolves with perfect teamwork. Before long, silence fills the chamber, and monster bodies lie across the floor. Looking around, our protagonist lets out a relieved breath and admits they somehow defeated the entire pack. Instead of thanking him, Canaria gives him a sharp look. She reminds him that he was only supposed to guide the party, not jump into dangerous battles. She proudly explains that she is a diamond rank holy knight and believes she could have defeated the werewolves without his help. But our hero quietly listens until he finally understands her feelings. To her, he is not a trusted ally. He is simply a stranger who entered the dungeon through a prisoner's path. With a tired smile, he admits that her doubts are completely reasonable. Anyone seeing him arrive through that entrance would think the same. Calmly introducing himself again, he says he has become used to people judging him before they know who he really is. Yui's honest words catch Canaria by surprise. Without turning around, she quietly says his name before telling him something unexpected, that if he dies here, it becomes her responsibility. Our boy looks at her in surprise. She explains that protecting ordinary people is every adventurer's duty. Then, looking slightly embarrassed, she adds that she was the one who brought him into this dangerous mission. Because of that, she feels responsible for making sure he leaves the dungeon alive. Hearing those words, our protagonist is deeply moved, softly calling her name. He begins speaking about his painful past. He says his life has been filled with suffering, and even after giving up everything, he still could not save the person who mattered most. Before he can continue, Canaria gently raises a hand and stops him. She quietly tells him there is no need to say any more. Everyone carries painful memories they wish they could leave behind. Those simple words stay with him. Watching her walk ahead, our boy smiles sincerely and apologizes for the way he acted earlier. After a short silence, Canaria accepts the apology. She says nothing else, but deep inside she realizes she judged him too quickly. He was nothing like the person she first imagined. The pair continued through the long stone hallway, their footsteps echoing across the cold floor. Breaking the silence, our protagonist asked Canaria where she thought Eligen and the rest of the party had gone. After thinking for a moment, she said the hero would most likely leave everyone behind and chase the Demon King alone. If they simply followed the Demon King's path, she believed they would catch up with him sooner or later. While listening, something suddenly caught our boy's attention. His eyes stopped on a huge hole broken through the corridor wall, and a smile slowly spread across his face. Pointing at the opening, he told Canaria he knew exactly where they were. She looked confused, so he explained that the hidden passage led to Lady Judith's second hideout, a place she rarely visited but one he knew very well. The memory of Judith's playful smile crossed his mind, making him laugh quietly. He admitted he had spent a lot of time there himself, and even mentioned that the hideout had been around for nearly 100 years. Canaria looked surprised and curiously asked where the tunnel actually led. The question made him freeze for a second. A small drop of sweat appeared on his forehead as he admitted it was a passage mainly used by vampires. The moment he said the word vampires, Canaria's face turned serious. Seeing her expression, our hero instantly realized he had said the worst possible thing. Knowing how strongly she believed in justice, he was sure she would want to hunt down every vampire inside. He quickly waved his hands and tried to fix the situation, saying, No, that's not what I meant." His mind raced before he blurted out the first excuse he could think of. He awkwardly claimed it was actually a break room. Canaria stared at him with clear doubt and calmly replied that she had never heard of a break room inside a dungeon. Trying to stay calm, our boy doubled down on the story. He explained that the room had beds, a kitchen, and everything needed to rest, adding with an awkward smile that he had stayed there many times himself. Canaria thought about it for a moment before shaking her head. They were not tired, and wasting time now would only help the Demon King. Without another word, she continued walking. Yui, watching her leave the tunnel alone, our protagonist quietly let out a breath of relief. Judith might be a vampire, but she had also helped him more than almost anyone else. At least today, he did not have to explain that complicated part of his past. The two continued through the old dungeon halls. Looking around, our boy noticed that almost nothing had changed even after 100 years. The cracked stone ceiling, the old walls, and the ancient paths all looked exactly the same. It almost felt like time itself had stopped inside the Katarov dungeon. After a while, he asked Canaria why she believed the Demon King had chosen this place to hide. She explained that during the battle at Arian, Eligen had badly injured the Demon King. In her opinion, it escaped into the dungeon to recover, but healing was probably not its only goal. Canaria believed the Demon King wanted to hunt the powerful dungeon bosses and eat them to steal their strength. Hearing that shocked our hero. If she was right, then every minute mattered. He immediately suggested rushing straight to the boss rooms so they could stop either the Demon King or Eligen before it was too late. Canaria agreed with the plan but warned him not to underestimate what waited ahead. They could easily run into the Demon King itself. Even so, our protagonist nodded without hesitation. Whatever stood in their way, they had no choice but to face it. Their conversation ended when they reached a huge reinforced stone gate. Suddenly, loud crashing sounds echoed from the other side. The moment he heard them, our boy's eyes widened as he recognized the place. This was the golem's chamber, and someone was already fighting inside. Both of them rushed to the doors and pushed with all their strength, but the heavy gate would not move. As they struggled, countless thoughts filled his mind. Was Eligen already inside? Had the Demon King arrived first? No matter how hard they pushed, the magical seal refused to break. No, Canaria quickly realized the same thing. The room would stay locked until the battle ended. Then, without warning, the sounds of fighting stopped. Silence filled the hallway. She suggested trying the door one more time, and this time the seal was gone. The giant doors slowly opened. The sight inside left both of them speechless. The enormous stone golem had been completely destroyed, its broken body scattered across the room. Sitting calmly on top of the rubble was Eligen, resting his sword across his lap as if nothing had happened. Not a single scratch could be seen on him. Both of them called out Eligen's name at the same time. Canaria hurried over and quickly asked if he was hurt. The hero simply laughed and replied that he had not even been scratched. He admitted he was just glad the Demon King had not reached the golem before him. Yet our protagonist could only stare in amazement. He remembered how Aja had struggled so much against this same monster, yet Eligen defeated it alone without any injuries. It was another reminder of why people called him the legendary hero. Without wasting time, Eligen turned back to the mission and asked whether the dungeon continued beyond this room. He also wanted to know if more boss chambers still remained. Our boy confidently answered that there were 2 left. The next one belonged to the Griffin, and after that came the giant centipede's chamber. His detailed knowledge impressed Eligen, who smiled and said trusting him had clearly been the right choice. At that moment, another memory returned. Judith had once said the giant centipede only moved into this dungeon about 50 years later. That meant history had not reached that point yet, and the final boss might be something completely different. Realizing the danger, Elijah immediately declared that they had to defeat every remaining boss before the Demon King could consume them. Turning to our protagonist, he reminded him that everyone was now depending on his guidance. Our hero accepted the responsibility without hesitation. A short time later, the three entered the next boss room. They all stopped at once. The giant chamber was completely empty. Dark blood covered the stone floor, and loose feathers were scattered everywhere. Looking around, our boy quietly said the only thing that made sense. The griffin was gone. Elijah instantly understood what had happened. He admitted he had underestimated the Demon King's speed. Even in such a huge dungeon, it had already found another boss. The griffin had not escaped. It had already been eaten. Without wasting another second, Elijah asked where the final boss was located. Keeping a serious face, our protagonist explained that the last chamber was at the deepest point of the dungeon. His answer surprised both Elijah and Canaria. They realized the final battle was much closer than they expected. The hero quickly pushed aside the surprise and ordered him to lead the way immediately. Our boy clenched his fist and started moving. As they hurried through the halls, he asked if it was really wise to continue without regrouping. What about Kano, Nayo, and Noka? Should they not find the others first? Elijah looked back with complete confidence and calmly answered that there was no time. Waiting would only make things worse. When the moment came, he intended to face the Demon King himself, because that responsibility belonged to the hero alone. Canaria added that Elijah's attacks were so powerful that fighting beside him could actually put everyone else in danger. Hearing that, our protagonist finally understood their decision. The smaller group continued deeper into the dungeon without slowing down. Along the way, they passed another beautiful treasure chest, but its lid was already open. Looking inside, our boy realized the crystal of wisdom had already been taken. There was nothing left to do except keep moving toward the huge doors waiting at the end of the corridor. Stopping before the entrance, he quietly announced that they had reached the final boss chamber. Anxiety appeared on Canaria's face, but Elijah stayed completely calm. Looking at the giant doors covered with crescent-shaped symbols, our protagonist slowly took a deep breath. Beyond them waited either the monster he remembered or the Demon King itself. Elijah gave a calm nod. Our boy answered with firm determination, saying, "Let's go." The giant doors slowly opened, revealing a huge throne room. The sight inside froze all three of them. Sitting comfortably on a massive throne was the Demon King, casually eating the remains of what looked like the dungeon's final boss. Our protagonist stared in horror as the truth hit him. The monster they had rushed here to save had already become the Demon King's meal. While both he and Canaria stood in shock, Elijah remained completely calm. A small, confident smile appeared on his face as he casually asked the Demon King how the final boss tasted. The Demon King paused in the middle of another bite and slowly looked toward the hero. Without the slightest concern, it simply replied that it was nothing special. Inside the huge throne room, Elijah stepped forward to face the Demon King. Zorga. A confident smile rested on the hero's face as bright, holy energy gathered in his hand and flowed into his sacred sword. Without a moment of doubt, he declared that their long war would finally end here. Standing behind him, our protagonist and Canaria quietly got ready for whatever was coming next. Though the Demon King slowly stood up from his throne, revealing his massive body, towering over everyone, Zorga gripped the giant black weapon in his hand and laughed. He casually said that his last meal had not tasted very good, but it had given him incredible power. Then his eyes landed on our boy. Smiling even wider, he welcomed him and joked that Kiska had saved him the trouble of hunting him down himself. The Mihawaro could only stare upward in silence. The monster was far bigger than he had imagined. For a brief moment, he honestly wondered if even Elijah had enough strength to defeat someone like this. Before anyone could react, Zorga grabbed his sword and rushed forward with unbelievable speed. Seeing the attack, Elijah warned Kiska to stay sharp, while Canaria also shouted for him not to lose focus. The hero instantly answered with one of the Holy Sword style's strongest moves, sending out a shining crescent slash. Zorga met it with a dark sword technique of his own. Holy light and black energy crashed together, and the explosion shook the entire throne room. Watching from behind, our protagonist could hardly believe his eyes. Neither attack had won. Both powers were so overwhelming that they completely canceled each other out. A second later, the battle started again without giving anyone time to breathe. Zorga laughed and called Elijah nothing more than an annoying insect. Instead of getting angry, the hero smiled back and calmly replied that he was only getting started. Their swords clashed again and again, sending sparks flying across the room as neither side backed down. Then one of Zorga's huge attacks missed its target. The slash flew straight toward our boy. Canaria instantly screamed for him to move. Without thinking, he jumped aside just before the attack destroyed the ground where he had been standing. Breathing hard, our hero quickly stood back up. Canaria rushed over with worried eyes and asked if he was hurt. He caught his breath and assured her he had escaped in time. Without taking her eyes off the battle, she warned him that neither Elijah's attacks nor Zorga's could be survived. If either one hit them directly, they would die instantly. Their only chance was to stay out of the way. As the battle continued, Canaria quietly explained who they were facing. Zorga belonged to a mutated race of man-eating giants. During the battle at Ariane, Eligen had badly injured him, forcing him to retreat into this dungeon. At the same time, the hero revealed another shocking truth while blocking another heavy attack. Among the master rank warriors, Eligen stood in 7th place, but Zorga ranked even higher. The news hit our protagonist hard. The Demon King was already ranked 5th before entering the dungeon. Now that he had eaten several dungeon bosses, he had become even stronger. Canaria admitted that he was probably more powerful than Eligen at this point. The battle quickly proved her right. Every heavy swing from Zorga pushed the hero farther back. For the first time, strain appeared on Eligen's face. Watching from the sidelines, our boy and Canaria could only stand there. There was nothing they could do against monsters at this level. Realizing he now had the upper hand, Zorga grinned and admitted that Eligen had entertained him longer than expected. Then he slowly raised his giant sword above his head and roared the name of his finishing move, Annihilation. Seeing the deadly attack coming down, our protagonist instinctively rushed forward. Canaria immediately grabbed his arm and stopped him, telling him to wait because she trusted Eligen completely. At the very last second, the hero slipped beneath the giant sword and avoided the attack by the smallest margin. Standing up again, Eligen calmly declared that battles were never decided by strength alone. Hope returned to the faces of his companions. As he prepared his next move, Canaria explained that besides his incredible sword skills, the hero had mastered a powerful enhancement technique that pushed every part of his body beyond normal human limits. Together, those abilities created the strongest technique in the Holy Sword style. A brilliant flash filled the room as an ultimate attack. A shining wave of holy energy cut across the battlefield and carried him straight past Zorga. The strike blasted the Demon King's helmet away and knocked the giant sword from his hands. But Zorga was still standing. Slowly turning toward the hero, the Demon King smiled and mocked him, saying even his strongest attack had failed. Our boy and Canaria stared in horror. Even Elidel looked shocked. He could not understand why his greatest technique had not finished the battle. Before the hero could recover, Zorga suddenly disappeared. A moment later, his giant fist slammed into Eligen's side. The impact threw him across the throne room before he crashed into the far wall. Blood ran from the corner of his mouth as he struggled to breathe. Only then did he realize this version of Zorga was far stronger than the one he had fought before. Seeing Eligen injured, our protagonist immediately ran toward him. Canaria shouted for him to stop, but Eligen yelled even louder, ordering both of them to stay back. Anyone stepping into the fight now would only get caught in the middle and die. Hearing those words, our boy froze where he stood. Meanwhile, Zorga calmly picked up his fallen sword. He admitted that he had planned to make the hero suffer before killing him, but he had changed his mind. Confused, our protagonist wondered what he meant. Dark energy began pouring into the Demon King's weapon until the whole room shook under the pressure. Zorga calmly announced that he would erase the hero completely with an advanced sword technique. The amount of power gathering around the blade left everyone speechless. Then, with one devastating swing, he released his ultimate attack, Phantom Holy Annihilation. Canaria watched in horror, realizing this could be the end. Eligen had nowhere to run. Accepting the situation, the hero quietly prepared to take the attack head-on. Just before the wave reached him, a single word echoed across the battlefield, save. Both our boy and Canaria froze. For a second, our protagonist wondered if he had imagined hearing it. Then something impossible happened. The enormous attack simply disappeared. Only burned rubble remained where Eligen had been standing. Zorga looked around in confusion before bursting into laughter. He mocked the hero, wondering if he had been completely erased. Before he could finish speaking, dozens of identical Eligens suddenly surrounded him and attacked from every direction at once. Our hero gasped while Canaria stared in complete disbelief. At first, it looked like the hero had somehow created copies of himself. Then the truth finally clicked. Those were not clones at all. Eligen was moving so fast that countless after-images overlapped, making it look like many heroes were attacking together. Canaria confirmed exactly that. The hero was using his unique save ability. By rewinding tiny moments of time again and again, he repeated the same attacks until every version of himself seemed to exist at once. The explanation shook our protagonist to his core. He also possessed both save and reset, but after seeing Eligen fight, he understood one painful truth. Even with the same abilities, he could never copy what the hero had just done. The difference between them was simply too great. But back to the instances, the pension returned to the battlefield as the real final clash began. The hero stood against Demon King Zorga in the battle that would later be remembered as the fourth hero, Demon King War. At last, Eligen's final time-layered strike landed perfectly, and with a final blow he slashes the Demon King's head. A small smile appeared on the hero's face as he declared that Zorga's rule had come to an end. Silence returned to the throne room. Canaria let out a breath of relief and respectfully called out to Eligen. Our boy simply spoke the hero's name. Turning toward them, Eligen smiled warmly and laughed, asking if he had made them worry. Before anyone could answer, another huge set of doors slowly opened behind them. The rest of the hero's party rushed inside. Gorgon immediately asked where the Demon King had gone, while the young elf Nero happily ran over to Eligen. Watching everyone prepare to leave the dungeon, our protagonist remained lost in thought. He had just seen Eligen defeat the Demon King by using the power of save. There was no doubt why this man was called the hero. Yet one question refused to leave his mind, that if Eligen was the true hero, then who exactly was Epika? Even though the Demon King had fallen, the biggest mystery of all had only become even deeper. Under the bright blue sky, a peaceful town enjoyed another quiet day. The tall stone church reached toward the clouds while the people below went about their daily lives, completely unaware that history had just changed. A brilliant light suddenly appeared above the town, and moments later, Eligen's party arrived on a high balcony overlooking the streets. Their long journey through the Katarov dungeon was finally over. Taking a deep breath of the fresh air, Eligen smiled and happily said there was no better feeling than breathing the air outside again. Gorgon laughed loudly and agreed. Although he admitted the only thing on his mind was getting a proper meal after spending so many days inside the dungeon, Neja rubbed her stomach and quietly confessed she was just as hungry. Before anyone could joke about food any longer, hurried footsteps echoed nearby as an elderly butler rushed toward them. Tears filled Flat's eyes as he welcomed the hero home, admitting he had been terrified after learning that Eligen had entered the dungeon with only a small team on a secret mission. Eligen smiled warmly and apologized for making everyone worry before calmly revealing that the Demon King had been defeated. Flat stood frozen in amazement, but before he could praise the hero, Eligen placed a hand on our protagonist's shoulder. He insisted the victory would never have been possible without Kiska's help. Caught completely off guard, our boy quickly denied it, saying he had barely done anything worth mentioning. Thesega simply shook his head and explained that without Kiska's knowledge of the dungeon, they never would have reached the Demon King in time. By the time they arrived, Zorga had already consumed nearly every powerful monster inside, and if they had been delayed any longer, the situation could have become impossible. Even though our hero kept trying to brush off the compliments, Eligen smiled and declared that in his eyes, Kiska had been the real MVP of the mission. The rest of the party nodded with sincere gratitude, making him feel even more embarrassed. After everyone became separated by the dungeon's teleportation circle, he had honestly been worried about the entire party. Our protagonist blinked in surprise and awkwardly confessed that he had never understood how the teleport system actually worked either. Gorgon guessed the hidden teleportation circle was designed to split apart anyone entering through the exile route, while normal adventurers using the main entrance never faced that problem. Before the conversation could continue, Flat politely reminded everyone that the villagers were waiting outside. Following him into town, the hero's party found a huge crowd already gathered. Excited whispers spread everywhere as people spoke about the hero entering the famous Katarov dungeon. Raising one hand, Eligen summoned an elegant treasure chest with magic, before proudly introducing himself as the first prince of the kingdom of Rastana. Once everyone's attention was fixed on him, Eligen announced that the Demon King had fallen. The treasure chest slowly opened, revealing Zorga's severed head resting inside as undeniable proof. Raising his fist high into the air, the hero declared that peace had finally returned to the world, and invited everyone to celebrate together. Loud cheers filled the streets while our boy quietly smiled to himself. For the first time in a long while, he felt like everything had somehow worked out. Nearby, Eligen laughed while chatting with Nayu, joking that ever since entering this era, not a single day had gone according to plan. Walking through the lively streets, our protagonist slowly felt the fear he had carried for so long begin to disappear. For once, things really seemed to be getting better. Even the heavy weight on his heart felt a little lighter. As they walked together, Canaria noticed the peaceful look on his face. She told him that the following day they would travel to the royal capital Lorna, where a grand victory parade would celebrate the defeat of the Demon King. Smiling slightly, she also warned him not to drink too much during the night's celebration, because they would be leaving early the next morning. Our boy suddenly stopped walking and looked at her in confusion. Hesitantly, he asked if that meant he would also join the victory parade. Canaria answered without any hesitation, reminding him that he was now one of the hero's companions. Those simple words touched him far more deeply than she realized, and even the respect in her voice carried a meaning he had never expected to hear. A genuine smile slowly appeared across his face. That evening, under a sky full of stars, the entire party gathered inside a lively inn for one last celebration before leaving the village. Laughter echoed through the room while Gorgon drank far more than anyone else thought was reasonable. Niall looked completely miserable after losing a battle against several mugs of ale, making even Canaria quietly shake her head. Around the table, our hero, Eligen, Canaria, Nock, Niall, and Ejaha enjoyed good food together during a rare moment of peace. As everyone celebrated, our protagonist remembered the promise Eligen had made. Once the official ceremonies were over, the hero intended to use all of his influence to help search for Ejaha exactly as he had promised. Since Eligen was the first prince of Rastana, he had resources far beyond anything Kiska could ever gather on his own. That promise filled him with new hope, and for the first time in many years, he truly believed he was getting closer to the answer he had been searching for. The next morning, 2 elegant carriages waited outside the village. Eligen organized everyone's seats himself. Canaria, Flat, and Nock climbed into the first carriage, while our boy rode with Gorgon, Neo in the second. The cheerful dwarf immediately slapped him across the back and loudly declared they were brothers now. The unexpected welcome almost knocked the air out of him, but he could not help smiling. Neo quietly watched the two of them. Thinking back to their awkward first meeting, she still felt there was a little distance between herself and Kiska. Pushing those thoughts aside, she cheerfully encouraged everyone to hurry toward Lorna. Once the carriage started moving, silence filled the inside until Gorgon decided he simply could not sit quietly any longer. Calling our hero Big Bro again, Gorgon curiously asked how many teammates had helped him conquer the Katarov dungeon. After a brief pause, Kiska quietly answered that he had cleared the entire dungeon alone. The answer shocked everyone inside the carriage. Even Gorgon, a diamond rank adventurer, stared at him with wide eyes because surviving such a dungeon alone sounded almost impossible. Our protagonist calmly explained that he had no other choice. After being thrown into the dungeon through the exile route, there was no escape until the dungeon had been cleared. He simply kept moving forward because stopping meant dying. Even Gorgon admitted that the thought alone gave him chills. Now then proudly joined the conversation, saying that if she had been there, escaping would have been easy because she possessed a return spell capable of teleporting people back safely. Kiska looked surprised, but she confidently insisted that even the hidden teleport restrictions would not have stopped her magic. Smiling, our boy explained that he eventually escaped only because a new teleportation circle appeared after the Demon King consumed the original final boss and was later defeated. Gorgon burst into laughter and teased Nui by saying she just wanted some credit for clearing the dungeon too. Blushing slightly, she quickly tried to defend herself while everyone shared a small laugh. Our protagonist smiled and assured her that he understood what she meant, bringing the light-hearted conversation to a peaceful end. The topic soon shifted again as Gorgon complained about wasting so much time because a headless horseman had chased him through several parts of the dungeon. Even with all the delays, he still managed to reach the deepest chamber just in time to see a legend fighting the Demon King. Our boy nodded before explaining that his own group had formed by chance. He first met Nao, later ran into the mysterious Naek, and from then on they simply followed Naek's lead until reaching the final chamber. Thinking about it more carefully, our protagonist suddenly realized something strange. He had never actually spoken to Naek during the entire journey. Looking across the carriage, he noticed the hooded adventurer quietly watching him from beneath the shadows of the cloak. Hidden behind that silent gaze, Naek wondered if Kiska possessed some kind of unusual ability. Without any warning, the carriage suddenly came to a violent stop. Everyone was thrown forward, and our boy barely managed to keep his balance while Gorgon immediately shouted for someone to check what had happened. Reacting without thinking, Kiska jumped out of the carriage and the others quickly followed behind him. The moment he looked ahead, he froze in place. Standing in the middle of the road were two familiar figures facing one another. One was Demon King Zorga, casually resting his giant sword across his shoulder as though nothing had happened. Standing opposite him was Eligen, with his sword already drawn. Our protagonist could only stare in complete disbelief, unable to understand how the Demon King could possibly still be alive. A cruel smile spread across Zorga's face as he calmly confirmed that he was indeed the same Demon King everyone believed had already been defeated. The confidence on Eligen's face vanished at once, replaced by visible fear. Sweat rolled down the hero's forehead as he looked toward Kiska and desperately begged him not to come any closer. Only then did our boy notice the terrible wound piercing straight through the center of Eligen's breastplate. His strength was already fading. The hero weakly called Kiska's name, and our protagonist screamed in horror as he rushed forward. At that exact moment, a sword made entirely of darkness flashed through the air. It never reached Eligen. Instead, the black blade pierced straight through our boy's chest. Blood burst into the air as his body froze in place. His eyes widened with unbearable shock while every bit of strength left his body. Barely able to breathe, our protagonist slowly looked down. Buried deep inside his chest was a terrifying sword unlike anything he had ever seen. Dark energy flowed through the blade while only one question filled his fading mind. Who had attacked him? Who had killed him? No answer ever came, Miles. As consciousness slowly slipped away, broken images flashed through his vision. A wicked black scythe, a silent figure, his own hand falling lifelessly toward the ground. He never saw the face of the one who ended his life, and before he could understand anything else, everything around him faded into complete darkness. Kneeling alone in a dim corridor lit by flickering torches, our protagonist struggled to accept what had just happened. Ever since arriving 100 years in the past, this was the first time he had truly died. He understood that this moment marked the beginning of everything. As he sat in silence, he deeply thinks that his own death meant very little, no matter how many times it happened. But if Eligen ever died, the future waiting 100 years ahead would be destroyed forever. Remembering those words, our boy quietly made a promise to himself. If Eligen's life decided the world's future, then he would protect him no matter what. This time, he would enter the dungeon again with the others and change fate before it was too late. However, the moment that determination filled his heart, painful memories rushed back. He remembered Eligen collapsing with a huge hole through his chest, the Demon King returning from the dead, and the black sword piercing straight through his own body. No matter how hard he tried, one question refused to leave his mind. Who had actually killed him? Slowly getting back to his feet, Kiska walked deeper into the endless stone passage while replaying every moment of the battle. Everything had happened far too fast. During the final fight, he clearly remembered seeing only Eligen and the Demon King. Still, one detail kept bothering him. The carriage ahead of his own had been carrying Canaria, Nock, and Flat, yet none of them had appeared during the final battle. The only answer he could think of was that everyone inside the front carriage had already been killed before the fight against the Demon King had even started. Our hero carefully rebuilt the events inside his head. First, an unseen enemy must have killed everyone riding in the lead carriage. Then that same person somehow brought the Demon King back to life before slipping behind Kiska's group and launching a surprise attack. Suddenly, another memory hit him. His killer had attacked from behind. Even after reaching that conclusion, something still felt wrong. Elijin was a masterclass warrior, and Canaria was a diamond-rank fighter. Defeating both of them so easily should have been almost impossible. Another piece of the puzzle refused to fit. Gorgon and Niu had been standing behind him during the attack. If the assassin wanted to wipe out the whole party, they should have been the first targets instead of the last. Before he could think any further, two giant monsters blocked the hallway ahead, a towering werewolf and a huge bugbear. Grinding his teeth, our boy refused to waste time while the Demon King was still alive. He rushed forward, cutting through both monsters while continuing to search for answers inside his own memories. As he ran through the dungeon, old memories returned one after another. Battles with old companions, the many skills he had learned, deadly spike traps, and countless painful deaths all flashed through his mind. Every memory felt distant, yet every one seemed important. Ignoring the monsters around him, he focused only on the final seconds before his death. Once again, he saw the twisted black sword bursting through his chest. This time, he noticed something he had missed before. Strange vein-like marks covered the blade, almost identical to the patterns on the puppet sword. A cold realization slowly formed. Although the weapon was not exactly the same as his own sword, it looked very similar to one of the Parasite series blades Judith had once explained. If his killer really carried a Parasite series weapon, then they were facing someone far more dangerous than he had imagined. Our protagonist knew he needed a better plan before things got even worse. The sounds of battle echoed from somewhere ahead, pulling him back to the present. The noise reminded him of the previous timeline, when Canaria had fought inside this very werewolf nest. Hoping to repeat the same successful path, he hurried toward the room, planning to reunite with her first. But the moment he stepped inside, he stopped in surprise. Instead of Canaria, Gorgon stood in the middle of the battlefield, swinging his huge axe with incredible strength as werewolves fell one after another. But Brisha's in disbelief. He clearly remembered Canaria fighting here before, so why had Gorgon taken her place? There was only one answer. His own death and the rewind had already changed history. Gorgon noticed him and waved with a wide grin, happily calling him Big Bro before walking over. Kiska could not help feeling impressed. The dwarf had wiped out an entire pack of werewolves by himself, without breaking much of a sweat. Without warning, Gorgon's smile turned serious as he suddenly swung his giant axe straight toward Kiska's head. Acting on pure instinct, our hero ducked just in time. The axe missed him by only a few inches before smashing straight through a werewolf sneaking up behind him. Gorgon laughed and casually said it looked like his new friend still had some fight left. Only then did Kiska realize how close he had come to dying again. Instead of showing concern, Gorgon lightly scolded him. If Kiska had really cleared the dungeon alone, then he should have been able to dodge an attack from someone as slow as him. The comment caught our protagonist completely off guard before the dwarf chuckled and admitted that meeting him here had worked out pretty well. Kiska gave an awkward smile and admitted Gorgon had a point. Resting his axe on his shoulder, the dwarf asked where they should go next to find Elijin. Our boy immediately stepped forward and reminds himself that guiding everyone through the dungeon was his job. Pointing toward the right corridor, he confidently explained that the path ahead was safe. As they walked, he apologized for not knowing the hidden teleportation circle would split the party apart. Gorgon asked if he had expected that to happen, but Kiska shook his head and admitted he had no idea. Then he surprised the dwarf by quietly revealing that he had once cleared this dungeon completely alone. Gorgon nearly stopped walking. He stared at Kiska with wide eyes and asked if he was serious. Our hero simply nodded, keeping the truth about his countless deaths and endless loops to himself. Clearly impressed, Gorgon remarked that someone capable of doing something like that deserved to be a full member of the hero's party instead of just serving as a guide. Kiska laughed awkwardly and continued leading them deeper into the stone passages. As they approached another section of the dungeon, our protagonist explained that the golem boss room should be just ahead and guessed Elijin was probably already there. His detailed knowledge earned another smile from Gorgon, who jokingly asked if he already knew the future. The simple question stopped Kiska in his tracks. As he forced out a nervous laugh, another forgotten memory surfaced. In the final moments before his death, someone had been standing behind him. His eyes slowly widened as the horrifying truth came together. It had not been a stranger. It had been Gorgon. The person who had killed him in the previous timeline was the very dwarf now walking beside him. Before he could react, they arrived outside a giant reinforced door as the sounds of battle echoed from inside. Gorgon immediately recognized the fight and quietly said that it had already started. Gorgon confirmed they had reached the correct room before pushing against the heavy doors, but they did not move. Kiska explained that the entrance would remain sealed until the battle inside was finished. Then Gorgon casually smiled again and repeated that Kiska really did know a lot. Instead of feeling comforted, our protagonist became even more uneasy. If Gorgon truly was his killer, he could no longer trust anything. The sounds of combat suddenly stopped, and moments later the giant doors slowly opened. Inside stood Elijin and Canaria. Gorgon laughed loudly as he greeted them, but Kiska could only stare in shock because history had shifted once again. Legend smiled warmly as he welcomed both Kiska and Gorgon, relieved they had reached the chamber safely. Gorgon proudly declared that ordinary monsters were no match for someone like him. Still distracted, our boy quietly called out Legion's name. The moment he looked at the hero's smiling face, he quietly thinks that tomorrow he was going to die. The chilling thoughts left him speechless. In reality, Legion simply asked him to continue guiding the party through the dungeon. Kiska forced himself to nod despite the storm inside his head. Together, the group crossed the remaining parts of the dungeon without much trouble, defeating the powerful Zorga smoothly. Eventually, the party reached the village again. 2 elegant black carriages waited on the road to Lorna. Legion naturally took charge, explaining that everyone could ride comfortably before assigning passengers to the first carriage. Well, when everything was almost ready, our boy softly spoke Legion's name and asked for a ride with Legion because he wants to rewrite the destiny by himself. Hearing this, Legion instantly agrees and calmly continued organizing the group. Nayu quickly raised her hand with an excited smile and asked if she could ride with them as well. The hero laughed warmly and welcomed the idea without hesitation, saying they might as well all travel together. 2 elegant horse-drawn carriages rolled steadily along a quiet dirt road. The peaceful sound of wheels turning and hooves hitting the ground blended with the calm countryside. Inside one of the carriages, our protagonist sat stiffly with sweat slowly forming on his forehead. This trip felt completely different from the previous timeline. Across from him sat Legion and Yao, yet no matter how peaceful the ride seemed, he could not relax for even a second. Silently, our boy promised himself that this time he would uncover the truth behind that tragedy and stop it before it could happen. His troubled expression did not escape Legion's notice. Leaning forward with concern, the hero gently asked if something was bothering him, mentioning that he had looked tense ever since they left. Caught off guard, Kiska realized his nervousness was much easier to notice than he had expected. He quickly forced an awkward smile and explained that he was simply nervous because he had never visited a city as grand as Lorna before. Legion accepted the excuse with a warm smile and assured him that those feelings were perfectly normal. He explained that the ruler of Lorna was his father, King Varian Rastarna, a kind man who treated people fairly. Since Kiska had played such an important part in defeating the Demon King, everyone in the kingdom would welcome him warmly. Those words eased the heavy weight on our hero's heart, and he smiled honestly as he admitted that hearing that made him feel much calmer. Legion smiled back and quietly added that he personally believed in Kiska as well. Though our protagonist reflected on how different things were now, Legion had no idea what had happened in the previous timeline, and everyone believed the Demon King was truly dead. Because of that, Kiska decided the safest choice was to act naturally and avoid drawing any attention to himself. Before he could think further, Legion called his name and asked whether he had ever visited Lorna before, or if he had really spent his entire life in Katarov village. Kiska nodded and explained that for the most part he had lived there all his life. He told them that he had grown up as a farmer, although he sometimes traveled to nearby towns like Gracel and Fiat to sell goods as a traveling merchant. Calling himself a simple farmer made him feel a little embarrassed, and he admitted that someone like him probably did not deserve to stand beside legendary heroes. Legion looked at him thoughtfully before gently pointing out that a farmer who had cleared the Katarov dungeon alone was anything but ordinary. The hero reminded him that Canaria had also started life as a commoner, while Gorgon had once been nothing more than a mercenary before becoming a famous adventurer. More importantly, Legion had personally seen everything Kiska had done during their battle against the Demon King. With complete sincerity, he told our boy that he was dependable, trustworthy, and someone others could rely on without hesitation. Smiling warmly, Legion simply asked if that was not enough. Kiska nodded that he truly believed Legion was an incredible person with a genuinely kind heart. Those honest words touched our protagonist more deeply than he expected. Turning toward the carriage window, he quietly watched the scenery pass by. One day, Legion would become the ruler of the kingdom, and that was exactly why he had to save him. The trees outside slowly became thicker as the forest came into view. The moment he recognized the place, his heart tightened because this was the same forest where disaster had struck in the previous timeline. Sensing his uneasiness once again, Legion smiled reassuringly and told him he should never hesitate to rely on him or the rest of the party whenever he needed help. Surprised by such kindness, Kiska quietly thanked him. Then, with a playful smile, Legion joked that everyone would do their best to help him find his girlfriend as quickly as possible. The unexpected comment completely caught our boy off guard. While Niao looked at him with obvious curiosity, blushing with embarrassment, Kiska hurriedly explained that Aja was not his girlfriend at all. Legion looked honestly confused and asked why he was searching so desperately for her, if that was the case. Our protagonist struggled to answer because there were no simple words that could explain their relationship. Memories of Aja, his gentle smile mixed with her terrifying side, filled his mind before he finally smiled faintly. He admitted that they were not family, and they were not lovers either. Their bond was simply impossible to explain, but he knew one thing for certain. If he had never met Aja, he would never have become the person he was today. Listening carefully, Legion slowly understood. Aja was not simply someone important to Kiska. She was someone completely irreplaceable. Our boy nodded firmly and admitted that the entire reason he had traveled back to this era was to save her. Silence settled inside the carriage as he looked out the window once more. He had come to this age to rescue Ajaha, but now he was also trying to save the greatest hero of this generation. A quiet thought crossed his mind, making him wonder if protecting heroes had somehow become his fate. The peaceful journey continued as the carriages left the forest behind and crossed a sturdy stone bridge. Before long, huge city walls appeared in the distance, growing larger with every passing minute. Eventually, the carriage slowed to a stop, and Eligen smiled as he announced that they had finally arrived in Lorna. Flat confirmed they had reached the capital, and everyone stepped outside. Standing before the towering stone walls and massive wooden gates, Kiska could only stare in amazement as endless buildings and crowded streets stretched across the horizon. Wiping the sweat from his forehead, he quietly admitted that the capital was even bigger than he had imagined, where Gorgon and the others had just arrived. Stretching his arms with a loud groan, Gorgon joked that riding in a carriage was rougher than fighting monsters, because his back had nearly given up halfway through the trip. Nearby, Canaria and the hooded Nock looked as calm as ever. After everyone gathered together, Kiska carefully observed each member of the group, as Eligen's loyal butler and Niao looked harmless enough. Soon the group entered the city, where huge crowds lined the streets to welcome Eligen and Canaria home. People cheered loudly as flowers and greetings filled the air. Watching the overwhelming celebration, our hero quietly remarked that Eligen was incredibly popular. The hero sighed with a tired smile and admitted that although he wanted nothing more than a good rest, his first duty was reporting everything to his father before doing anything else. Not long afterward, the party entered Lorna's grand throne room and respectfully knelt before King Varian Rastarna, who sat upon the royal throne surrounded by his advisors. Eligen formally reported the success of the mission, and the king welcomed everyone with a warm smile, explaining that he had already received reports of their victory. King Varian congratulated the entire party. After thanking him, Eligen summoned an elegant treasure chest before the throne and invited his father to look inside. As the lid opened, the severed head of Demon King Zorga was revealed. Shock spread across the royal court as everyone stared at the terrifying trophy. King Varian immediately recognized the Demon King's head and praised the difficulty of defeating such a powerful enemy inside the deadly Katarov dungeon. However, Eligen politely corrected him, explaining that none of it would have been possible without one exceptional person. Resting a hand on Kiska's shoulder, the hero proudly told the entire court that our boy's guidance and strength had made the victory possible. Embarrassed by all the attention, Kiska wished he could disappear on the spot. The king turned toward him with sincere gratitude and personally thanked him for everything he had done. Our protagonist humbly replied that he had simply done what anyone else would have done in the same situation. Impressed by both his skill and modesty, King Varian offered him any reward he desired. The unexpected offer left Kiska speechless for a moment before he admitted that he was already searching for someone, something Eligen had previously discussed with the king. At first, he insisted that he needed no reward at all. Even while standing before the throne, however, his thoughts remained focused on only two goals: preventing Eligen's death and stopping the Demon King's return. Quietly thinking about what request might help achieve both, our boy finally admitted that what he wanted was not really a reward. Standing beside the chest containing Zorga's head, he respectfully explained that he simply had one suggestion. Behind him, Eligen and the others watched with curiosity as King Varian leaned forward and asked with interest what that suggestion might be. However, Shani settled over the royal castle. Darkness slowly covered the capital, while stars appeared across the night sky. Later that night, a grand victory banquet filled the castle with music, laughter, and endless food. Kiska sat beside Eligen, Canaria, and the rest of the party at a long table covered with expensive dishes. Even surrounded by celebration, our protagonist admitted there was still one question he could not stop thinking about. His thoughts returned to the previous timeline. How had their mysterious enemy managed to interfere with the Demon King's head when it had been safely stored inside Eligen's item box? That mystery had inspired the suggestion he had given to the king earlier. Simply stealing the head from a moving carriage should have been impossible, which meant an even bigger question remained unanswered. How had the assassin killed Eligen and brought the Demon King back to life? At least one part of his plan had worked. The Demon King's head had now been placed somewhere completely separate from the party. Deep inside Lorna's sacred temple, the ornate chest rested alone upon a stone altar inside a protected chamber. Even so, Kiska could not shake his worries. Would Eligen still die? Would the Demon King somehow return anyway? Late that night, alone inside his room, our boy strengthened his resolve. This time he would uncover the identity of the mysterious killer and end the threat once and for all. Meanwhile, inside the quiet temple, the chest holding the Demon King's head rested beneath the soft light of two flickering candles. Without making a sound, a lone figure stepped out from the darkness. Canaria calmly walked toward the altar with steady footsteps, her face hidden in silence. Her calm expression suddenly changed to complete surprise as she slipped an elegant silver ring onto one finger of her armored gauntlet. A slow smile spread across her face before growing into an excited grin as she quietly whispered that the moment she had been waiting for had finally arrived. Meow. Suddenly, Kiska appears behind Canaria. Our protagonist forced an uneasy smile despite the sweat running down his forehead, and politely asked what she was doing there. The silence that followed made his heart pound even faster. A chilling thought slowly entered his mind, and for the first time he wondered if Canaria herself could be the true culprit behind everything that had happened. Tufif's suspicion hung heavy in the air as Kiska watched Canaria approaching, silently wondering if she was indeed the traitor they had been looking for. Maintaining a remarkably calm demeanor with a slight smile, Canaria explained that she was simply doing her usual rounds to check for any suspicious individuals. Shadow falling over his eyes, our boy adopted a serious expression and bluntly accused her of trying to misuse the Demon King's head, though Canaria quickly brushed it off by claiming that was exactly the threat she was checking for. Forcing a smile, our protagonist nervously asked if she meant someone trying to revive the Demon King, a question that caused Canaria's face to instantly drop into dark, ominous shadows as a tense silence filled the corridor. Breaking the heavy quiet with a nervous fake smile, Canaria sweated slightly while trying to change the subject, asking if anyone was truly capable of such a feat, to which a nervous Kiska replied that he didn't know. Internally, our hero reminded himself that he still lacked concrete proof of her betrayal, but he knew he had to press forward to uncover the truth, finding comfort in the fact that the revival was impossible as long as the Demon King's head remained securely locked away. As they walked further, Canaria grew visibly shocked and flustered, her hand gripping her sword as she defensively claimed Eligen would not be killed before angrily and bashfully demanding what Kiska was planning. A confident dark smirk appeared on our protagonist's face as he realized he had finally baited her out, teasingly asking if that wasn't something she understood best herself. Canaria smirked back with an arrogant huff, prompting a serious Kiska to acknowledge that the truth was finally out. Flaunting an evil smile, Canaria admitted she had disliked him from the start and demanded to know how much he truly knew, leading our intense-eyed protagonist to finally call her out as the traitor he never expected her to be. Canaria confidently shrugged off the accusation, declaring that whether it was killing Eligen or reviving the Demon King, everything would go according to her plan, though our boy defiantly vowed to stop her. Turning her back to him with a sinister smile, Canaria claimed he was already too late as a mysterious, multi-eyed ring of chaos began to glow brightly on her hand. She proudly boasted that this artifact bestowed by her master could tear open space and time to resurrect the Dark Lord, finally letting out a crazy villainous shout as she placed her hand on the magic chest containing the relic. To her utter bewilderment, the ring completely failed to react, forcing a confused Canaria to yank the chest open only to find it entirely empty. While her face twisted in absolute shock, Kiska stood by looking completely calm and smug, furious and utterly losing her mind. Canaria screamed at him, demanding to know if this was his doing and where he had hidden the head, to which our boy offered a cheeky, confident smile and casually apologized for hiding it away beforehand. The pieces suddenly clicked for Canaria, who ground her teeth in frustration, realizing she should have suspected something when our hero originally suggested displaying the head to the king. Drawing her weapon with a wide-eyed, psychotic smile, she threatened to end his life right there if he didn't cooperate. But an unbothered Kiska simply drew his own sword under the shadows of his eyes. Ready for battle with magic flames dancing along his blade, our protagonist fiercely challenged her to try and take it, ignoring her arrogant taunts about a mere platinum rank trying to defeat a diamond rank powerhouse like herself. Flashy combat stance ready, Canaria accepted the challenge, while Kiska confidently smirked, muttering that they wouldn't truly know the outcome unless they gave it a shot. Internally, Kiska readily acknowledged that Canaria was an exceptionally formidable opponent, fully aware of the massive chasm in power that separated a platinum rank from a diamond rank adventurer. Driven by lethal intent, Canaria lunged forward with blinding speed, shouting that she would gladly slice him to pieces just as he wished. A fierce and dizzying sword fight erupted instantly, with Canaria unleashing a relentless barrage of heavy, aggressive strikes that our boy could barely manage to parry. Feeling the terrifying wind of her previous strike, our hero realized it had been entirely too close for comfort, and that he stood absolutely no chance against her in a contest of raw strength or standard combat proficiency. However, a confident smile tugged at the lips of our protagonist as he suddenly activated his acceleration skill, moving with such explosive velocity that a stunned Canaria cut nothing but empty air. Darting to safety, Kiska casually explained that his current platinum ranking was only a reflection of his evaluation, before he had acquired this game-changing ability. Thanks to his newfound speed, our hero confidently declared that he could now comfortably match her pace, causing Canaria to scoff and angrily dismiss it as nothing more than a sneaky, underhanded trick. Deep down, our protagonist knew that even though their speeds were now perfectly balanced, she still held a massive advantage over him in raw power. Even so, he flashed a bold grin and vowed that he would absolutely not lose, prompting a glaring Canaria to demand what could possibly justify such reckless confidence. Kiska reflected on his immense lifetime of experience, having traveled back a full century into the past and witnessed countless brutal conflicts to learn one ultimate truth about warriors. No matter how legendary a swordsman or powerful a fighter might be, every single one of them ultimately fought out of a desperate desire to protect their own life. Our boy considered himself entirely detached from that survival instinct, having already perished countless times until he simply stopped fearing the concept of death itself, proudly and fiercely declaring that mortality held absolutely no terror for him. Right in the thick of their high-speed clash, our protagonist suddenly tossed his blazing sword high into the air, causing a thoroughly bewildered Canaria to scream out in sheer panic at the bizarre tactic. As the weapon spun through the air and dropped back down, Kiska deftly caught the hilt and seamlessly brought the edge right against her throat, leaving her completely defenseless and paralyzed. Adopting a dead serious tone, our hero demanded to know why she had betrayed Eligen, especially since she had taken a sacred vow of loyalty to him, and why she was trying to resurrect the ancient demon king. Our protagonist resolved that her next words alone would determine exactly how he would handle her moving forward. Canaria merely chuckled, noting that while she had no idea how he had uncovered so much, she would finally grant him the truth since he had forced her hand. Suddenly, her face flushed red with a bizarre blend of embarrassment and twisted affection, and she confessed with a dark smile that her feelings for His Highness went far beyond mere loyalty. She was hopelessly in love with him. Utterly shocked and confused by her bizarre confession, Kiska stammered to know what she was talking about and why she would act this way if she truly loved him. Canaria's face darkened in the shadows as she quietly began to explain her twisted logic. Blushing with an eerie, obsessive smile, she posed a hypothetical scenario about hating someone more than anyone else in the world, specifically a powerful prince of immense status and strength. She asked our boy what he would do to guarantee that person's absolute destruction. The horrifying realization suddenly clicked for our protagonist, who panicked internally as he realized she was referring to Eligen. Looking at him with chilling intensity, Canaria asked how one could possibly erase the most powerful killing intent in the world. Burying her deeply blushing face in both hands, she let out a crazed smile and declared that the only real choice was to force herself to love them. Reeling from extreme shock, our hero suddenly understood the terrifying truth that Canaria had suppressed her murderous urge toward Eligen by completely overriding it with artificial love. Overwhelmed with horror and disgust at how terrifying this woman truly was, our protagonist fiercely yelled at her to abandon these twisted thoughts immediately, vowing that he would protect Eligen no matter what. Thrusting his sword forward with angry determination, he warned that if she still intended to revive the Demon King or assassinate Eligen, he would have no choice but to kill her. Yet deep down, a profound sadness washed over our boy. He desperately wanted to avoid taking her life because, even if it had all been a lie, she was once his comrade, and in a completely different timeline, she had actually been genuinely kind to him. Canaria merely responded with a wide-eyed, psychotic laugh, mocking his threat and daring him to give it his best shot. Stealing his heart beneath a heavy shadow of sorrow, our protagonist silently apologized for the sake of the world before charging forward to strike. Their blades clashed with tremendous force as Canaria maintained a dark, confident grin, but our hero was thrown into absolute shock when her weapon suddenly transformed right before his eyes. Staring in disbelief at the black eye-adorned parasitic sword now resting in her grip, he recognized it instantly as the legendary puppet sword. It felt entirely impossible to him that Canaria could be the one wielding such a cursed artifact in this era. Exuding a dark, suffocating aura, Canaria taunted that she had only let him run wild for a bit to figure out his true identity, but he had clearly gotten carried away. She unleashed a devastatingly heavy strike that caught our hero completely off guard. A brutal and intense struggle ensued as Canaria used her sinister new weapon to deliver an incredibly aggressive onslaught, forcing our boy to defend himself by the skin of his teeth. Pushed back with a painful groan, our protagonist ground his teeth in pure stress, realizing that his own blazing sword put him at a massive disadvantage against the puppet sword. Having used that exact weapon himself in the past, he understood its mechanics better than anyone. Even in its base state, it granted passive stat bonuses to attack and defense while perfectly optimizing the user's combat movements. Sweating under the pressure of her unhinged, wildly excited assault, our hero accepted that he would surely lose at this rate, leaving him with no choice but to run. Breaking away from the clash, he made a frantic dash toward the door to retreat, only for a massive, heavy attack to suddenly shatter the air as Gorgon abruptly blocked his path with a wicked grin and swung his weapon, leaving a terrified Kiska screaming out in absolute horror. With a mocking, arrogant sneer, Gorgon taunted our broken hero, remarking that it was pathetic to get hit by such a slow attack. Trembling in agony and covered in blood, Kiska could only manage pained, wheezing gasps as he lay sprawled on the ground. Gorgon, clutching his own eye-adorned weapon, offered a grin and apologized to Canaria for his late arrival. Although Canaria briefly told him to hold back, she soon realized it was pointless once Gorgon pointed out that their target was already on the verge of death. Visibly annoyed, Canaria muttered that it could not be helped, while an awkward Gorgon offered a nervous, sweating chuckle. As the pair walked away, leaving our defeated protagonist lying motionless in the dirt, Canaria coldly shifted her focus to their next objective. She decided that they would simply eliminate Eligen first, before proceeding with the Demon King's resurrection. Under the cold light of the night sky, a voice from behind confirmed the order with a sharp acknowledgement, signaling that the cycle was destined to begin all over again. Kiska knelt on the cold ground, the weight of a horrific realization pressing down on him as the truth finally clicked into place. Watching Canaria, who clutched the malevolent parasitic sword with a twisted predatory smirk, he understood the full scope of the conspiracy. Everything that had unfolded, all the tragedies and betrayals, were threads woven into a single sinister tapestry. As the pieces aligned, he whispered to himself that he finally saw the design of his enemies. He felt a sharp pang of alarm, realizing that both Canaria and Gorgon were the architects of his misery. The situation turned dire as he noted that Canaria possessed the puppet ring, a terrifying tool that complemented her blade perfectly. He realized that Gorgon's scythe-like weapon was the very same instrument that had executed him in the previous timeline, confirming that his adversary was also a user of the Parasite series. Faced with two wielders of such dark artifacts, our protagonist knew he had to survive this encounter alone, desperately needing a new plan to overcome this impossible gap in power. Deciding to stick to the familiar, he stood up and resolved to follow the same path as his previous life, heading directly toward the werewolf den. As he navigated the dark corridors, he felt a flicker of doubt, questioning if he could truly defeat foes equipped with parasite weapons. He recalled that in his past encounter, he had fought Canaria to a stalemate when she relied on standard steel. This gave him a slim shred of hope that he might still hold an advantage if he could catch them before they fully unleashed their cursed gear. He stopped abruptly, his senses sharpening as the ambient noise of the dungeon vanished. Pushing forward cautiously, he approached a chamber, only to find the area littered with the corpses of werewolf guards. His eyes widened in shock. Neither Canaria nor Gorgon were visible, suggesting she had dispatched the entire pack with ruthless efficiency. Entering the chamber, he finally spotted Canaria. He felt a jolt of alarm but quickly masked it with a practiced, friendly smile, fearful that showing his true intentions would alert her to his knowledge of her betrayal. He praised her for clearing out the entire den, single-handedly, acting as if he were simply glad she was safe. Canaria remained stoic, dismissing the slaughter as routine work against weak monsters. She quickly shifted the conversation, insisting that they rejoin Eligin immediately, and asked if he knew the way forward. Maintaining his calm, our protagonist assured her he had a clear idea, suggesting they head straight for the mid-boss room where he suspected the prince was hiding. They began to move together, but inside, his mind was a storm of hesitation. He knew he could potentially strike her down right there, but he feared that Eligin would mistake such an act for treason and execute him on the spot. Tension coiled in his gut as he wondered if he could truly stop her, but he steeled his resolve, reminding himself that he had to see this through for the sake of the prince and the world. Suddenly, Gorgon's voice boomed through the hall, startling him as the brute caught up to them. Gorgon, brandishing his weapon with a wide, unsettling grin, acted as though they were long-lost companions. Kiska felt a chill of dread, questioning why Gorgon had appeared now. Canaria welcomed him back, and Gorgon casually remarked that he hadn't expected the party to be split, laughing off the situation as if it were a minor inconvenience. Internally, our hero felt the crushing weight of the odds. With both enemies united, he knew he had no chance of defeating them, so he resolved to play along until an opening presented itself. The mood shifted when Gorgon stopped smiling and bluntly suggested they drop the act. Kiska froze, his heart hammering against his ribs as Gorgon admitted that his puppet ring was buzzing with a strange, frantic energy. The realization hit him like a physical blow. Gorgon wasn't just guessing, his artifact was actively detecting hostility. Canaria, her face settling into a cold, dangerous mask, admitted that she had harbored suspicions all along and had been waiting for him to make a move. She leveled her blade toward him, fully prepared for a lethal confrontation. Our protagonist struggled with the unfairness of it all, wondering how they could possibly know he was their enemy when nothing had even transpired in this timeline yet. He sensed a lingering shadow of the Parasite series, a strange, unnatural power that seemed capable of reading the very beating of a person's heart. Gorgon roared, demanding to know his true identity. Fear warred with tactical necessity. Our hero knew that revealing any details of his time-looping existence would be a death sentence, so he played the part of the confused traveler, claiming he was simply Kiska. Gorgon sneered at the lie, pressing him to confirm if he was an enemy of their organization, the Chaosists. Kiska felt a cold sweat prickle his skin as he heard the name for the first time. Gorgon explained that they were the group destined to remove Eligin and resurrect the Demon King, noting that his ring's reaction proved Kiska was a threat. As our protagonist tightened his grip on his sword, hoping to dodge an initial strike, Gorgon struck with terrifying speed. The hit landed, sending Kiska sprawling to the floor in agony. His hopes of a quick victory shattered. Nkazi lay broken on the ground. Gorgon prepared for a finishing blow, targeting his legs. Overwhelmed by the futility of fighting both foes at once, our boy considered simply letting them kill him so he could reset the timeline. However, their conversation shifted when Gorgon paused, wondering aloud if Kiska might be one of the hero's apostles. He warned Canaria that killing such a target could bring far more trouble than it was worth, suggesting that sealing him away would be a safer, more strategic move. Before our protagonist could process the threat, Gorgon activated the magic stored within his sealing ring. Kiska screamed in terror, pleading for them to stop, but the dark energy washed over him, binding his limbs in chains and dragging his consciousness into the void. Moments later, he found himself suspended in a glass container, a prisoner trapped in a silent, icy tomb, completely cut off from the world he had fought so hard to save. Enveloped in a void of absolute nothingness, our hero found himself adrift in a realm defined only by its crushing, endless darkness. There was no sky to gaze upon, no ground beneath his feet, and not even a distant horizon to mark the bounds of his prison. He felt a profound sense of disorientation as he realized this was the world he had been sealed into, a static, featureless dimension where time itself seemed to have ceased its march. He attempted to ground himself by moving his limbs, but he was met with the horrifying discovery that he could feel nothing, neither the press of air against his skin nor the solidity of an object. He was a prisoner of his own mind, unable to scream, unable to move, and unable to interact with the world beyond his own consciousness. This was the true nature of his containment, a solitary confinement where his awareness was the only thing left of his existence. The foe is wished as the days or perhaps weeks, months, or years bled into one another. Our protagonist fell into a state of profound psychological decay. Without the natural rhythms of day and night to anchor his sanity, the passage of time became a meaningless abstraction. He counted numbers, hoping that the act would preserve some semblance of human logic, but the agony of his isolation only deepened with each passing cycle. He felt neither hunger nor the need for sleep, yet the absence of those basic human necessities was just another form of torture. The loneliness grew so immense that it became a physical weight, a crushing boredom that threatened to hollow out his soul. He found himself questioning if it had been a year or a decade since he was first cast away, yet the answer remained perpetually out of reach, lost in the suffocating stillness of the void. During these desperate moments of introspection, his mind drifted back to memories of Ajaha, the complex and enigmatic figure who had once fought by his side. He recalled a mission where they had faced a rare dryad monster deep within a dungeon. He remembered the thrill of the combat, the fluid way he had dispatched the wood-like creature with his blade, and the warm, cheerful praise she had offered afterward. There was a time when the two of them had discovered a fruit-bearing tree amidst the gloom of the dungeon, and she had smiled with genuine delight as she shared the sweet reward with him. In those fleeting moments, being with her had made the treacherous dungeon feel like a playground, a source of companionship that made the danger seem trivial. He remembered how they had stumbled upon a legendary chest of wisdom, which had granted him a skill named Pledge. At the time, Aja had playfully suggested that the name symbolized an eternal promise to stay together, a sentiment that had once made his heart flutter with confusion and hope. But these memories were a double-edged sword. They highlighted the impossible dichotomy of the woman who haunted his thoughts, the terrifying manipulative version of Ajaha who had subjected him to endless torment, contrasted against the pure, innocent girl who had once offered him solace. Why had she been so drawn to him? Why had she seemingly cared? These questions gnawed at his psyche, transforming his loneliness into a source of unbearable grief. Tears streamed down his face as he lay in the dark, sobbing into the vacuum of his prison. The realization that he missed the company of people, that he longed for the simplest human interaction, hit him with the force of a tidal wave. He realized that the concept of despair, as defined by the living, was a luxury. For those who still had an end in sight, despair was a destination. For him, there was no end. His suffering was an eternal state of being, a cycle of consciousness that would never find the release of death. As he reached the absolute nadir of his mental fortitude, he began to scream into the silence, his voice a frantic plea for an end to the madness. He begged for the darkness to consume him, for the monotony to stop, for any mercy that might finally release him from this endless cycle of introspection and pain. Just as the crushing weight of his situation seemed as though it would finally snap his remaining tether to reality, the void shattered. A blinding, searing flash of brilliance erupted within his prison, tearing through the suffocating gloom. The fabric of the space he inhabited began to fracture, and the container that had held him captive for eons splintered into a million crystalline shards. Light, real, tangible light poured into the dimension, burning away the shadows that had become his only companions. Stunned by the sudden influx of sensation, our protagonist staggered as his physical form began to respond to the world once more. He squinted against the harsh radiance, his eyes struggling to adjust after what felt like an eternity in the dark. Before him stood a figure, a silhouette framed by the brilliance of the light that had set him free. As he stumbled forward, the haze of his isolation began to dissipate, revealing a familiar, elegant form. He looked up, his face still streaked with the tracks of his tears, and his voice trembled with a mixture of shock, awe, and desperate relief. Standing there, bathed in the glow of his salvation and wearing a smile of mysterious, ethereal beauty, was Judith Sama. The sight of her shattered the remnants of his despair, replacing it with a sudden, overwhelming surge of hope as he realized his long, nightmarish imprisonment had finally come to an end. Kneeling upon the cold floor, our protagonist looked up, tears streaming down his face as he stared at Judith in disbelief. The sheer impossibility of his situation made him wonder if this was merely a cruel illusion manifested by his failing mind. Yet, as the reality of his freedom set in, he began to shake uncontrollably, his words failing him as he tried to express the profound shock of having finally escaped the seal. Judith looked down at him with a composed, faintly amused expression, her presence a stark contrast to the absolute darkness he had endured for so long. She eventually asked how he had come to be imprisoned in such a place, but our hero found himself unable to articulate the horrors of his isolation, his voice lost to an overwhelming tide of emotion. When he introduced himself, Judith repeated his name with a note of uncertainty, remarking that those sealed within the deepest reaches of the dungeon were beings of world-altering power, and she questioned the true nature of his identity. As she spoke, memories of Ajaha flooded his mind, and for a fleeting moment he felt he finally understood the complex burden she had carried. Judith mused about the decades she had spent trapped, noting how strange it was for someone else to finally appear and liberate him. mirroring her own past. Overcome by a sudden irrational surge of affection and relief, our protagonist lunged forward and pulled Judith into a desperate tight embrace. He confessed that he no longer cared about the consequences, lost in the raw intimacy of the moment. Judith's initial shock quickly soured into visible irritation. She grew annoyed and visibly angry at his forward behavior, reprimanding him for his blatant rudeness. In a flash of lethal movement, she drove a spike of dark energy directly through his chest. Even as the life drained from him, our hero looked up with a tearful, affectionate gaze, thanking her for the release and telling her he loved her. Judith, however, remained menacing and cold, declaring that she would not forgive such insolence as he collapsed to the ground, whispering to himself that he could not believe she had saved him yet again in this timeline. Desperate to see her once more, he clung to the hope that a future meeting was possible, comforting himself with the thought that Ajiha was currently absent from the dungeon, which meant he was safe from immediate reprisal. He rose with newfound determination, resolving that he would seek Judith out, even if only for a brief moment. His primary objective remained the salvation of Elijin, but he decided that just once, he would act entirely on his own terms. Entering the room, he was hit by a wave of disappointment to find it empty. Judith was gone. He stood in the silent chamber, reminiscing about the days he had spent pouring blood and preparing meals for her, recalling her explanation that the emergence of a new boss, Raymore Haas, 50 years prior had kept her confined to the depths. He realized that in the current era, she should be able to travel freely, and though he regretted missing her, he promised himself that their paths would cross again. Reflecting on his miraculous escape, he vowed never to forget the act of salvation, but his stoic resolve soon returned as he refocused on the immediate crisis. He knew the tactical danger of being sealed away again was too great, and since he had no guarantee of a savior next time, he had to be ready to force a reset. With a pained but resolute expression, he drove his own blade into his chest to trigger the cycle anew. Navigating the corridors once more, he took great care to avoid the paths where he might encounter Canaria and Gorgon, deeming any confrontation with them at this stage far too risky. He pushed toward Elijin, reasoning that they could not possibly have reached the prince's location without his lead. Arriving at the door, he sensed that the prince was currently embroiled in combat, and noting the absence of other party members, realized he had a narrow window to initiate his plan before the others arrived. Too wide. He stepped inside, finding Elijin sitting on a stone block, looking surprised to see our hero had navigated the dungeon on his own. The prince stated he was counting on him to lead the way to the bosses, but our protagonist looked nervous and insisted that there was something urgent he needed to disclose. Stuttering, he blurted out that there was a traitor in their ranks, and Thulnajar'd wide and he whispered might, unable to grasp the gravity of the claim. With a heavy heart, our hero identified Canaria and Gorgon as the culprits, warning that catastrophe was imminent if they remained part of the party. Elijin, however, grew skeptical and dismissive, arguing that such a thing was impossible as he had trusted them for years. His frustration mounting, the prince finally drew his sword and pointed it at our protagonist, warning him that he would not tolerate such insults toward his loyal comrades. Distraught, our hero endured the sharp edge of the blade pressed against his throat, shouting in desperation that the pair would surely kill him. Elijin remained fierce and defensive, maintaining an unwavering trust that they had no motive for such an act. Internally, our hero felt the agony of his countless loops, the sheer exhaustion of dying over and over again for the sake of a man who refused to believe him. He discarded his own sword and leaned into the prince's blade, his face shadowed by intense, frantic resolve. He screamed at Elijin to kill him right here and now, demanding to know what he was supposed to do if the prince truly could not trust him. It was a desperate final gamble. He pressed his body against the steel, swearing that he would put his life on the line as many times as it took to ensure the prince's survival. Leaving Elijin looking genuinely shaken and horrified by the sheer intensity of his outburst,